Hello, good people. How is everyone on this Saturday? Well, we're going to be talking about philosophy and psychology. I know that the Jung content took some time to get there because if you're an OG, you know that before we even started Nietzsche, we had already said that we would be doing Jung, and well, now 2 years later, and we're just starting. But I hope that this is going to start the renewal of philosophy on this channel. King Ghidorah, the flu is kicking your ass. Welcome to the club. I've been sick for the past 2 days too, but I cannot not stream. Coucou. How is everyone? I hope that everyone is doing well. I hope that your training is going well. I hope that your daily life is doing wonderful as well. My domain expression hand sign would be something a little bit goofy. Maybe like something like this. Ikito Tenkai. And then whatever my domain expansion is. Yes, this is a stream. This is live. You are seeing me live on air. If you check the community post last week, I let you guys know that there would be no stream previous Saturday because I was busy. But the schedule for this month is set up, and this is the first philosophy stream. And hopefully the first of a long line. Do you think the world is better without Instagram? I know that I'm better without Instagram. It's horrible for your mental health. And the fitness content on it is abysmal because, well, fitness creators have figured out that it's rage content that triggers engagement because people insult you in the comments. So there are people who go out of their way to give bad information on purpose on Instagram, which is insane. On YouTube, they don't do it on purpose. They're just stupid. Literature, yeah. This is going to be philosophy, literature. Is that a braid? This is natty, bro. Natty curls, bro. I don't do anything to my hair. It just ends up looking like this for some reason. Why was there no video on Sunday? Everything all right. So first and foremost, I apologize. At this point, it's becoming a running theme that I'm not able to meet my commitments. Unfortunately, I found out last week that I'm going to be laid off from my job. If you are in the US, you know that the tech layoffs are going crazy right now. Thousands of people are being fired, and I'm one of them. That's it. I'm not going to cry about it. It's just life. But now I'm in a situation where, well, I'm the sole income of my family, so I have to find something else. And I also will not let these motherfuckers get away with it. So I'm going to sue. I'm going to engage in legal action, and this takes a shit ton of time. But I'm okay. Honestly, life is not bad outside of that. Am I getting Mandela effect, or did you once have a video called "You Must Become Peerless"? I guarantee you, I've never had a video called that. But maybe the theme in the video made you think of that. Is there a chance you're going to bring back the subscriber program review while you're in luck, my good friend? Because next week is going to be a subscriber program review stream. So for 3 hours, I'm going to be reviewing you guys' program. Why don't you make more videos about PD users? There's too many of them. I haven't given up. I still get exposed to their videos and content, and I get mad. But I'm also at the point where, like, making videos shitting on people that I think are idiots doesn't make for good content. I'll still do it from once in a while. Can you separate art from the artist? Not just traditional art, but all forms of art. Yes. You're a software engineer. Could you refer my company? Well, I won't say no to that. Shoot me a message on Instagram. Yeah, I know that a lot of people tell me just put ads on. I will never do it. So I'm looking for other options. Yeah, I'm an American now, so I'm going to sue. Kiss the mic, maybe later. We'll do physics reviews. You're essentially spoiling the theme of the next hypertrophy Q&As. Yes, eventually I will open physics reviews to you guys. You'll be able to send me pictures and videos of you, and I'll critique your physique. Have you looked into Jungian psychological typing? No. Yes, this is going to be the first Jung stream. So even if you know nothing about Jung, you're not going to be lost at all, because this is going to be the introduction. You told me a while ago being political philosophical is just a way of posturing. If you aren't using it actively, why study it? No, being political. Being philosophical, I don't think I've ever said that. Although there are a lot of people who are into philosophy because they perceive it as making them look more intelligent, which is, it really doesn't. Are you religious? No, but I'm spiritual. Thoughts on Jungian archetypes? Well, to cite Jung himself, the archetypes are what you make of them, and there is no fixed interpretation of any given archetype, as we will see when we read the book. Best novel, in your opinion? Like, this is too vague. Like, in the fantasy genre, in the realistic genre. General thoughts on natural talent bodybuilding. Someone who I believe is actually natural, achieved a very high level, and is in love with training. So someone who is going to most likely be relatable and give good advice, even if it's not 100% applicable to you. Like, you should never train the way someone else trains, but you should look at the way they train and figure out a way for you. What does it mean to be spiritual but not religious? Well, that's the theme of the stream. It means believing in an unconscious word, for example, without having to explain this unconscious word with a creator. Thoughts on veganism? Well, that is actually going to take an actual video and not just a stream. But the streams, I think, are going to greatly help with the videos, because that way, instead of making a gazillion videos on Jung, I'll be able to make a few based on center themes, and then I'll refer people to these streams if they want to hear more. Tu vas faire combien de streams sur Modern Man? J'ai le bouquin en français, mais je ne l'ai pas encore lu. It's impossible to know how many streams I'm going to be doing, simply because I don't know how much ground we're going to cover in 3 hours, because the stream is going to be 3 hours. So if we cover like barely a chapter, there'll be 10 streams. If we cover 2 chapters, 5 streams, etc. Does this mean no multi-video, 2-hour videos is on Jung? Shame, I like long format videos. No, there will be long format videos on Jung. It's just that I have come to realize that if I only do actual videos that I plan and edit for philosophy, you'll get 3 philosophy videos a year, and that's simply not enough. Will we start from the start? Yes. I'm letting people come in. I think that this stream is going to be the least popular because it's philosophy, which is perfectly fine by me. A smaller committee of people, so we'll get more direct interaction. It's going to be very laid back, but we're going to start very soon. What books do you recommend to start with for someone new to reading? Honestly, fantasy, anything that is going to catch your attention. Realism and philosophy can be a bit tough for a lot of people. What do you do in your free time? I clean, I walk more, I train. That's my free time. Comment les concepts jungiens de l'inconscient collectif et des archétypes se confrontent-ils ou s'harmonisent-ils avec la notion nietzschéenne de surhomme? Well, Anas, you are asking very interesting questions. We're going to get into it. Ever read Eragon and Age? Of course, Eragon is a great book, especially when you consider that Christopher Paolini was 14 when he wrote it, 16. I mean, granted, it's nothing new. He just took a bunch of shit that Tolkien had already spoken about, but he did something cool with it. Philosophy definitely makes people look more intelligent if they made their own belief by reading lots and digesting the information. As long as they don't spout difficult nonsense, they read. Well, this is what you just pointed out as the issue with philosophy. It's a bunch of people who read things they don't understand and they just like repeat it. Look at the amount of idiots who call themselves like absurdist or existentialist, and their entire conclusion to these 2 schools of thought is life has no meaning, law. Any plans on reading Ego? How many people? If I do a stream on Hegel, how many people? If we get 100 people, that will be insane. Herman S. I think Herman S. was the guy who wrote that philosophical book about war. I have yet to read it, but I have it in my bibliothèque. How do you deal with resentment? I think a philosophy of life that articulates itself against resentment is a good philosophy of life because it's a waste of time. Thoughts on Machiavelli? I enjoy his writings. Isn't Hegel a meme at this point? No. He's pretty important, especially if you want to like dive into Marxist theory. He's at the foundation of it. Ever practiced martial arts before? Yes, I did judo, I did Taekwondo. I did a little bit of Muay Thai and boxing. You know René Guénon and H, of course. Now that we have the streams, and again, this is me projecting myself in a more productive future, but I'm open to any book. Do you follow the UFC? The UFC, in my opinion, has lost its way because now there's a UFC every fucking week. It used to be exciting because there was a lot of like very strong fighters once in a while. Do you like Welbeck? Probably wrong spelling. Welbeck is a good French author, although he's a wimp, and I don't like wimps. But his writings are interesting. Is Obelix study or not? No, because he fell in the vat of magic potion when he was a kid. And Foucault stream eventually, yeah, that could be fun. Any good way to go from literature into philosophy? Read books that are not strict philosophy or like theoretical philosophy, but have philosophical themes in them. All right, we're 11 minutes in, so I think we're going to start because that's pretty much the amount of people we're going to get. Hey, John, how are you? And before we start, I have a question for you guys. Do you want classical music or not? I was thinking for these streams to like play classical music in the background, like low volume, but I'll let you guys decide because it's going to influence. But I see a lot of no's. It's going to influence the people who are going to watch the stream afterwards. Thank you. Yeah. So I think because like this is like building upon something else that we discussed. I don't know how the straw polls works. This is my straw poll. This is Democracy Manifest. Last time, years ago, when I make the first niche video, someone just pointed it out. People said no classical music. And I think that between people who don't like the extra stimulus and people who would like it as an extra, I'm going to go with the people who find it distracting. And so we're going to go with no classical music, which is great because that also means that the video will not be copyright striked and just it won't end up with a bunch of what is the charge? Eating a meal, a delicious Chinese meal. Yeah, no, we won't do it. Okay, perfect. Friends, we are finally there. We are finally going to study Jung. So this is going to be the review and the study of Modern Man in Search of a Soul, a book that I've read multiple times and I've taken my little notes to the point that there's even greasy, disgusting headbands that are stuck in them. So, for those of you who don't know, Jungian psychology is a form of philosophy. And its importance is in the title, Modern Man in Search of a Soul. Jung was trying to understand and study what in modern life led to so many people feeling lost. And he wrote a full book on it. So the way it's going to work is I'm going to read not the entire book. That's something that you should be doing, but the passages that I think are the most important because I've highlighted them, and then we're going to discuss them. And I'm going to, of course, look at the chat as much as possible. But when I'm deep within a like discussion of a philosophical content and concept, I might not be able to look at your message. But if you have any questions or there's a point you don't understand, please at any point stop me. That is the entire point of this philosophy stream. So let's get started and let us enjoy. And we're going to start naturally with chapter 1 that is named Dream Analysis and its Practical Application. So first and foremost, I must warn you that dream analysis is not an exact science. Jung did not think it was an exact science. It's at the basis of his theory. I know that many people, when they hear dream analysis, they say, oh, really? This hocus pocus bullshit? You're going to tell me you can read my mind by the content of my dreams? That is not what Jung argues here. For the entire chapter, he's doing the exact opposite. The content of a dream is an indication. It's something that your psyche is trying to communicate. And I open with this because it's so important. If you're the type of person who believes that dreams are random, this is not going to make sense to you. But if you accept the idea that dreams are an evolutionary trait that humans have developed to survive and evolve, then everything will make a lot of sense. Why? Because think about it for 1 second. Is there any physiological attribute to the human body or the human mind that is useless? Some of them we don't understand, but for the most part, if something is still there, it means it has a use and a purpose. Now, dreaming takes energy, it takes brain power, and it happens every single night. You might not know it, but every single night you dream for hours upon hours. Why is your brain doing this? Some people would point out that it's trying to cleanse. It's a physiological attribute. It is also maybe something that is done to preserve your psyche. It could be something that your brain is doing to review what happened throughout the day so as to best prepare you for the future. Because if you think about it for 1 second, you go through the day, you face difficulties, and maybe some of them you cannot fix. You go to bed, and when your body is resting, your mind is still trying to figure it out so that when you wake up the next day, those who have had dream that guided them will survive, and they will go on to be able to have offsprings who themselves will possess that trait. This is the biological basis of the entire argument. So he begins by saying that the use of dream analysis in psychotherapy is still a much debated question. Many practitioners find it indispensable in the treatment of neurosis and ascribe as much importance to the psychic activity manifested in dreams as to the consciousness itself. Others, on the contrary, dispute the value of dream analysis and regard dreams as a negligible byproduct of the psyche. So this second category of people, I've already told you, I don't agree with personally. But the first one is interesting. Some people ascribe just as much importance to the content of your dreams as to the content of daily life. So in Jungian philosophy, consciousness and unconsciousness, the conscious and the unconscious, are put at the same level because they are mirrors of one another. Okay, they cannot be separated. You cannot understand the conscious mind without understanding the unconscious mind. If a person holds the view that the unconscious plays a leading role in the formation of neurosis, so psychological issues, he will attribute practical significance to dreams as direct expressions of the unconscious. So your dream becomes the way your psyche speaks to you when you're not conscious to try and fix issues. If, on the other hand, he denies the unconscious or thinks that it has no part in the development of neurosis, he will minimize the importance of dream analysis. And therefore, he will remove himself a very important tool and method because suddenly you are no longer able to utilize this biological component of the human brain to help your patient. You'll come to understand that in this situation, I'm not the therapist, you are the therapist. This is why I love Jungian philosophy and psychology. It's because it encourages people to become their own therapist. Over a century since Kant spoke of the immeasurable field of obscure ideas. And yet, the actuality of the unconscious should still be a matter for controversy. So, this is a little bit of a name drop, but Kant also spoke about the importance of the unconscious. Without it, the dreams appear to be merely a freak of nature, a meaningless conglomerate of memory fragments left over from the happenings of the day. So that is absolutely true. If you look at your dream and you look at it like separated from your life and you look at it as just something that is happenstance, that is not going to make much sense. It's going to look like a Frankenstein of ideas. But if you look at it through the lens of dream analysis, suddenly it's going to gain significance. And this is a vital point as well. What gives significance to the dream is not the dream itself. It's what you ascribe to the dream. And this is where dream analysis can become dangerous because you can start to project ways that you feel about the world onto your dreams. But see, this is not a glitch, it's a feature. That is the point. The dream itself means nothing. What you think the dream means is what is important because in truth, you're going to reveal the thing that your brain is trying to tell you to yourself because you yourself know what is significant in your life and what isn't. You say you rarely remember any dreams you have. See, this is interesting. There are some people who remember pretty much every single night of dream that they have, at least some fraction of it. Some people don't. A study recently came out that people who have Alzheimer's don't remember their dreams at all. So there seems to be a correlation between the two. Yes, and also please hydrate. I keep forgetting to do it, so I'm going to take breaks to drink, but it's very important. Do you think Jung is misogynist? That's possible. I mean, the majority of male authors at the time were. And lucid dreaming is interesting as well, because what is lucid dreaming? Lucid dreaming is you like brute forcing the unconscious into becoming the conscious because you become active. I don't know if Jung actually spoke about that, but that's interesting. All right. It is well known that the Freudian school is of the opinion that important therapeutic effects are achieved by throwing light upon the unconscious causal factors, that is, by explaining them to the patient and thus making him conscious of the sources of his trouble. So that is also the point of dream analysis. A psychoanalyst who tells you your dream means this is a bad psychoanalyst, he's a bad therapist. What he must be doing instead is trying to get you to reflect on the dream and see if you can come up to a solution. He cannot do it by himself. He is supposed to guide you there. I skip large portions of this. Jung loved to talk about things that are not related to the topic at hand, which is the reason why I encourage you, if you read this book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, to not be discouraged if sometimes you don't understand where he's going, because oftentimes he doesn't know himself. A trick that I have to understand Jungian psychology and philosophy is the following. This is how Jung writes. Jung begins by a theory, right? He introduces a premise. Then he goes on to like rant about things that look completely unrelated and are going to like lose you completely. And then at the end, he has a paragraph that is a conclusion to the premise. And then he goes on to explain it. So if you don't understand what you're reading, just keep reading. You're going to come to a conclusion, and then the thing beforehand is going to make sense. Don't get discouraged, okay? I understand that Jungian psychology can be a bit discouraging at times, but I guarantee you that it's quite precious once you get to it. Now, I'm going to read you a story by a man who came to Jung to understand why he was suffering in life. And he came to him with a dream. I was consulted by a man who held a prominent position in the wood. He was afflicted with a sense of anxiety and insecurity and complained of dizziness, sometimes resulting in nausea, of a heavy head, and difficulty in breathing. This being an exact description of the symptoms of mountain sickness. He had had these symptoms. He had had an unusually successful career and had risen with the help of ambition, industry, and native talent from a humble origin as the son of a poor peasant. Step by step, he had climbed, attaining at last an important post that offered him every opportunity for further social advancement. He had actually reached a place in life from which he could have begun his ascent into the upper regions when suddenly his neurosis, so psychological problems, intervened. At this point of his story, the patient could not refrain from that stereotyped explanation which begins with the familiar words, "and just now when I." The fact that he had all the symptoms of mountain sickness was highly appropriate to the peculiar situation in which he found himself. He had brought with him to the consultation 2 dreams of the preceding night. So here, we have a man who started at the bottom of the totem pole, poor. He managed to climb the ranks, and he's at the brink of breaking into the upper class. And suddenly he's getting feelings of anxiety and feelings related to mountain sickness. Based on this, what do you think that means? Without the dreams, without the dream sequence, you are the psychoanalyst. What do you think is happening to that man? Okay, we have Ramash who says fear of change. Imposter syndrome, scared of losing. Okay, scared of losing it. That's interesting. Syndrome de l'imposteur, fear of social mobility. He doesn't think he belongs. So he has bought into the idea that his social status is something that is essential to his being. And he's afraid of what will happen if he goes that next step. Fear into the subconscious. Okay. Ascending too quickly. Okay. Because that's what happens with mountain sickness. It's because the difference in altitude creates a lack of oxygen because you climb too quickly. Achieving his goals will change his persona, which I just said. Okay. Anxiety over aggressive impulses, competition could be. They're unconscious as unresolved feelings that is coming out as self-destructive. Well, that is absolutely true, but this is like true in general. Fight or flight, ego death, still Still didn't get the sense of accomplishment and pride he was looking for. See, I think that this is not actually something that we could apply to his case here. A lot of stress. Okay, let's see what all of this manifests into when it comes to dream. The first dream was as follows. I am once more in the small village where I was born. Some peasant boys who went to school with me are standing together in the street. I walk past them, pretending to not know them. I hear one of them who is pointing at me say, he doesn't often come back to our village. No tricks of interpretation are needed to recognize and to understand the allusion to this dream. What is happening in this dream? This is so interesting because I know that this is a dream that many people have. Well, they're back home and they meet people that they used to see on a daily basis and they have that type of interaction. Yeah, he feels he's betraying his origins. He feels like he is no longer himself. He abandoned his community. He also has now a sense of feeling superior to them because it's stated here that he doesn't interact with them. He pretends he doesn't know them. Yeah, he's losing connection to who he used to be, etc., etc. And so I'm going to now read what Jung's conclusion for this dream was. The dream says clearly, you forget how far down you began. He climbed the ladder so fast that he was no longer himself because he had bought into the idea that his humble beginning was a flaw of his personality and nature, but deep down he knew it wasn't. And so now he is feeling a form of guilt because he felt like he abandoned the people that helped him when he was younger, but also the person that he was. Then there is the second dream. I am in a great hurry because I am going on a journey. I hunt up my baggage but cannot find it. Time flies, and the train will soon be leaving. Finally, I succeed in getting all of my things together. I hurry along the street, discover that I've forgotten a briefcase containing important papers, dash breathlessly back again, find it at last, and then run towards the station, but make hardly any headway. With a final effort, I rush onto the platform only to find the train steaming out into the yard. It is very long and runs in a curious S-shaped curve. It occurs to me that if the driver is not careful and puts on full steam when he comes to the straight stretch, the rear coaches will still be on the curve and will be thrown over by the speed of the train. As a matter of fact, the driver opens the throttle as I try to shout. The rear coach rocks frightfully and are actually thrown off the rail. There is a terrible catastrophe. I awake in terror. Let me know what you think this means. The man has forgotten something in his dream. He's running back and forth, back and forth. He's going to miss the train, but he makes it to the train. But when he comes to the station, he realizes the train is going too fast and is going to derail, and it does derail. He is the train. Okay, so that's the second part of the dream. He is both the man and the train because the train went off the rails because it was trying to go too fast. He's anxious about where his life is going. Okay. He feels like he avoided the catastrophe of starving in his village. I wouldn't say that. The one thing that I want to point out, because it's at the start of the dream, is he's in a great hurry because he's going on a journey. He's trying to look for his baggage, but he cannot find it. How many of you guys have had that dream? I have that dream all the time where I have to be somewhere, like the airport, but before I can get there, I have to locate something, and the location of the thing is impossible and causes me anxiety. I think that this is a factor, this is an archetype of dreams that is extremely prevalent. If you have that dream, let me know in the chat. What do you think this means? When you try to locate something and you can't. Yeah. Dreams where you're trying to get to a point, for example, and no matter how fast you go, you can never reach that point. Il cherche le but dans sa vie. He's looking for his life goal. Loss of control. I think this is it. Loss of control. Because think about it for 1 second. In the conscious world, when you try to locate something, unless it's lost, you know where it is. But in the dream, you are supposed to know where it is and you cannot find it. It's like the thing is escaping you. You are not in control of something you should be in control of. So here we have a man who has who has the intense feeling that he lost control of his life. And the control of his life is also here, the train. Why has he lost control? Because the train is going too fast. Why is it going so fast? Because he's trying desperately to put distance between him and his village of origin. And yet he still has feelings of guilt associated and attached to this village. So this is how these two dreams interact and what they explain in the man. And then you have the train that derails. The train that derails. What does that mean? Mm. LeBron James says something very interesting. Maybe losing control will save him. Maybe in this scenario, the man actually wants the train to derail. He wants something to happen in his life to stop him because he is not able to stop himself. And this is why we see how important it is to pay attention to the unconscious, because his conscious mind is not able to accept all of that we just discussed. So he's begging for the unconscious to get it done, and the unconscious gets it done in his dreams. I see people interpreting the coach and the last carriage as maybe some as a representation of who he used to be. That's absolutely possible. But essentially, at the end, when the terrible catastrophe happens, Jung tells us that here too we can understand without much difficulty the situation represented by the dream. It pictures the patient's frantic haste to advance himself still further. Since the driver at the front of the train goes thoughtlessly ahead, the coaches behind him rock and finally overturn. That is, a neurosis is developed. It is clear that at this period of life, the patient had reached the highest point of his career, that the effort of the long ascent from his lowly origin had exhausted his strength. He should have contented himself with this achievement, but instead he is driven by his ambition to attempt and to climb. And so, because he tries to scale to these new heights of success for which he is not fitted, the entire thing goes to waste. That is, I think, a very profound and very interesting interpretation. The man had already done so much. He could have been satisfied with it. But the front of the train, his ambition would just not stop. But the back couldn't keep up. And so, because of the speed of the front of the train, the rest of the train had the entire enterprise derail. The neurosis came upon him as a warning. So oftentimes we see psychological issues as the problem because we suffer from them. But the truth of the matter is that it could be a symptom that is telling you that something worse is going to happen. And if you fix the problem, in this case, if you become self aware, the neurosis is going to go away because it was simply a way for your brain and your unconscious to tell you, hey, we are going to derail. You do not listen to me in the conscious because you are the master in the conscious, but in the unconscious, the psyche takes over and I can finally speak to you. Will you listen to me? The man, unfortunately, in this scenario, did not listen. Circumstances prevented my treating the patient, and my view of his case did not satisfy him. The upshot was that events ran their course in the way indicated by the dream. He tried to exploit the professional openings that tempted his ambition and ran so violently off the track that the train wreck was realized in actual life. So the guy lost everything because he would not listen to his unconscious. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And you can relate to it in fitness as well. Yes, look at the amount of people who should have been satisfied with a physique attainable naturally, but no, they want more, they take drugs. And without realizing it, the entire thing goes off the rails. And they lose sight of their origin. Why did you start in the first place? To look like a monstrosity? No, because you wanted a better body for your spirit, for your psyche. And now you no longer even have that. Can we interpret the lack of background description? That's most dreams, though. See, the unconscious goes straight to the heart of the problem. It oftentimes doesn't bother with creating something around it. So you're saying the unconscious sends messages to you via dreams? Yes. And it's nothing to do with the subject. I'm weird for having garlic on pancakes. You can have garlic on everything you want. What about dreams of the toilet? I don't know. Depends on the dream. I know that Freud had some things to say about people who are constipated and who dream of toilets. Right. So that was a very interesting example, and you'll see that there are many more in this book. I'm not going to cite every one of them, but many more. So this is the quote-unquote conclusion of the theory that Jung presents. The dream gives a true picture of the subjective state, while the conscious mind denies that this state exists or recognizes it only grudgingly. So, in everyday life, your ego is going to get in the way of your ability to say, okay, I'm doing poorly or something bad is going to happen because, well, you don't want to accept the reality. But the good thing is that the unconscious doesn't care. So the unconscious is going to give you a perfect picture of the actual state of your psyche that is going to be, for the most part, true. It's then up to you to listen to it or not. The patient's conscious ego could see no reason why he should not go steadily forward. Yes, of course. Why shouldn't I try to become richer and gain more status? That is your ego speaking, because your ego doesn't know. The ego is not, in this case at least, connected with the unconscious. The ego is blind. Il a ce qu'on appelle en français des œillères. Those things that you put on horses so that they can only see forward, they can only move forward. Best analogy. That is what ego does to a man. When in such cases we listen to the dictates of the conscious mind, we are always in doubt, because the conscious mind, unfortunately, doesn't have the necessary information to guide us. At this point, the dream comes in as the expression of an involuntary psychic process not controlled by the conscious outlook. It presents the subjective state as it really is. It has no respect for my conjectures or for the patient's view as to how things should be, but simply tells how the matter stands. I've therefore made it a rule to put dreams on a plane with physiological fact. Vital. A dream is a physiological fact. A lot of people like to believe that it's separated. The function of your bladder is the exact same as the dream function, the exact same. And this is underrated. Oui, c'est un conflit entre le conscient et l'inconscient. There is a constant conflict between the conscious and the unconscious. And oftentimes, the conscious wins because we are aware and awake when the conscious mind is at its most powerful. How come we forget our dreams within 10 minutes of waking up? Because the conscious takes over. And the conscious has no space, no storage space for the contents of the unconscious. See how the battle wages war? This is why I recommend, if possible, get a notebook next to your bed, and when you wake up from a dream, write it down. And you will be shocked about what you read when you wake up. C'est quoi le lien avec l'individuation? Well, it's very simple. Individuation is the complete acceptance of who you are, meaning that you take all of the components of your being and they all go together. And that includes the unconscious. If you refuse to listen to the unconscious, you cannot go through a proper process of individuation. The conscious mind makes mistakes, the unconscious do too. Absolutely. But in this case, I think we need to point out why. It's because your only way to attack and to analyze the unconscious is the conscious. And interestingly enough, you pointed out something vital here. That's what the unconscious does. When you have a dream, it's your unconscious studying your conscious state of mind throughout the day. But then, unfortunately, we don't have computers that can study your dreams yet. So you are forced to use the conscious. And this is when it becomes an issue because your ego might get in the way. This is where books like this come into play and where the role of the therapist is. Because the therapist is a third party that has a distant outlook. What's the most meaningful dream you have had? In recent years, that has been the dream that I'm going back to school. Something that I dread and hate because I was so glad to be done with school. So when I kept dreaming that I was back in college, I was trying to figure out what was happening to me. And so what was happening to me was that I had regrets because I flunked out of my first year of bachelor's because I was bored and I took it easy on myself, and I have yet to forgive myself for that. So I keep dreaming that I'm back at that first year and that I ace all of my classes. That is my mind trying to make up for something that I cannot make up with my conscious mind. You know what? You just made me realize we could do something very cool. Not today, but maybe next time. We could do a dream analysis stream where I just look at your dreams and we try to interpret it together as a chat. That could be cool. Is there a way to increase the amount of dreams? Yes. You drink a lot of water before you go to bed, which will force you to wake up and go to the bathroom throughout the night, at least once a night. And then when you go back to bed, you'll have more dreams. All right, so let's keep going. So I just read to you the fact that a dream is a physiological fact. And as always, I added a note that told me to go to page 16. Dreams give information about the secrets of the inner life and reveal to the dreamer hidden factors of his personality. As long as these are undiscovered, they disturb his waking life and betray themselves only in the form of symptoms. This means that we cannot effectively treat the patient from the side of consciousness alone, but must bring about a change in and through the unconscious. As far as present knowledge goes, there is only one way of doing this. There must be a thoroughgoing conscious assimilation of unconscious contents, which we just discussed with individuation. By assimilation, I mean a mutual interpenetration of conscious and unconscious contents, and not, as is too commonly thought, a one sided valuation, interpretation, and deformation of unconscious contents by the conscious mind. Do you see? This is what makes Jung a great author. He answered a question that someone had in the chat. He answered two questions that you guys had 100 years after his book was published. This is why I've reread that book so many times. It is really a gem. It is pure genius. Up. This brings me back to the Freudian view mentioned above that for the purpose of therapy, it is necessary for the patient to become conscious of the causal factors in his disturbance. A view that is little more than a survival of the old theory of the trauma. So the idea and notion is what I explained at the start, that you go through things in your life, and if there are difficulties, your brain retains them. And since you cannot treat them when you're conscious because you're busy or you have other things to do, and it's more cost effective, the brain and the psyche waits until you're asleep and the conscious is asleep, and the unconscious can take over. That is the function of the unconscious. This also means that sometimes if you are traumatized and you have traumas that you refuse to deal with, the trauma will keep coming back in your dreams because it's the unconscious saying, hey, this thing is still here. You have yet to treat it. And if you let it, it's going to fester and it's going to start to manifest as symptoms in your conscious life, symptoms that are going to be neuroses and therefore detrimental. So here is a dream to try and get you to treat that trauma. Getting chased by someone, look at who has that type of dreams. I read a study recently that the majority of people who dream that they're being chased by someone are children and women. I think that makes a lot of sense. The most vulnerable people in their day-to-day life keep having dreams that tries to literally train them at escaping people. And when you have a dream where you cannot escape the person, what does it mean? It's your brain trying to, in a sense, convey that vulnerability to make you aware of it. What if you cannot outrun? Will you upload the live stream? Every single live stream will be uploaded, yes. So even if you miss the start, you will get to catch up. Clé pour comprendre les conflits internes, les désirs refoulés, les forces inconscientes. Absolutely. You got those dreams when you're small and weak and you don't get them anymore. See? You're small and weak. And your unconscious says you're small and weak. You fix that problem, the symptoms go away. Hello, NH. Hello, Exil. Dreams about fire. There's a book called The Psychoanalysis of Fire by a French psychoanalyst. Very interesting. Dreams of home invasion. What is that? It's a form of insecurity that manifests when you sleep. Do you stop after a couple of sentences that reflect when you read alone too or not? Yes, which is the reason why it takes me so long to read a book. Because sometimes I'll read a paragraph and then I'll stand like this for like 5 minutes thinking about it. What does it mean that I don't remember my dreams? You might just have a very deep sleep, and so you don't enter the cyclical phase of sleeping, where your dreams become aware. Or rather, you become aware of your dreams. Do you think Jung was a psychic? I don't think so. Although some of his writings are very mystical. Oh boy. Yes. All right. So we just spoke about trauma. I do not, of course, deny that many neuroses have a traumatic origin. I simply contest the notion that all neuroses are of this nature and arise without exception from some crucial experience of childhood. This view of the question results in a causalistic approach. The doctor must give his whole attention to the patient's past. He must always ask why and neglect the equally pertinent question, what for? So here, Jung is not telling you that it's impossible to get baggage or trauma from childhood. He's just saying that if you constantly ask why, as in what event of your past triggered the trauma and the issue and the neurosis in everyday life, you're going to lose sight of the what for. And the what for is, why do you have the neurosis? Why do you have the bad dreams? What function are they trying to fulfill? In a sense, he's saying that oftentimes the unconscious is demonized because when the unconscious manifests as symptoms, in this case, bad dreams, it's oftentimes just dismissed as, oh, it's a symptom of the trauma and it will go away when we fix the trauma. Jung says, no, you will not be able to fix the trauma until you understand the dream. The dream is the key to fixing the trauma. Of course, not in every single case. This is frequently very harmful to the patient, for he is forced to search in his memory, perhaps over a course of years, for a hypothetical event in his childhood, while things of immediate importance are grossly neglected. So, in the case where you have a patient who has a trauma and is not able to know exactly why, it's stupid to try and like probe until they come up with something that they might even have invented about their past to justify the symptom when the symptom itself gives you enough information. You must not neglect the symptom. A new set of dreams, and I'm going to be asking you questions to see if we are on the same wavelength and to discuss its meaning. I should like to illustrate this, so this entire theory about trauma and dreams and neurosis, by recounting 3 dreams of the same patient. She consulted 3 different analysts in turn, and at the beginning of each treatment, she had one of these dreams. Here is the first dream. I must cross the frontier into the next country, but no one can tell me where the boundaries lies, and I cannot find it. The treatment which followed this dream was unsuccessful and was soon broken off. What is that dream? What do you think it means? Can't escape. Okay. Feels lonely and lost. Aimlessness. Lack of direction in life. Searching an unreachable goal. Okay. She's trying to locate a frontier to go somewhere else and she cannot find it. Escape to the unknown. Est-ce que ça veut dire que les symboles dans les rêves sont universels? No. Symbols and archetypes in dreams are not universal. They can share some universal traits, but they don't always mean one thing. Culture, for example, has a massive impact. Un rêve d'un bédouin n'a pas la même signification qu'un rêve d'un inuit. Parce qu'ils ont des vies différentes, des cultures différentes et donc des symboles différents. Okay, I read some of your interpretations. We're going to look at, I think he goes on to explain it. Yes. Well, I remember what the dream means, so I'm not going to read it directly, but we'll read it again. So this first dream means that this woman is trying to locate the unconscious and she can't. She's trying to locate the frontier into the next country, the frontier between the conscious and the unconscious, but no one can tell her where the boundary lies and she cannot find it. And unsurprisingly, the treatment that follows fails because she dealt with someone who was not able to tap into her unconscious. And so the dreams meant nothing and the symptoms were never actually understood for what it was. The second dream is as follows. I must cross the frontier. It is a black night and I cannot find the custom house. After a long search, I notice a small light far away and suppose that the frontier lies over there. But in order to reach it, I must cross a valley and pass through a dark wood in which I lose my sense of direction. Then I notice that someone is with me. This person suddenly clings to me like a madman and I awake in terror. The treatment that followed was also discontinued after a few weeks. The reason being that the patient was completely disoriented by the analyst unconscious identification with her. First off, I find that dream absolutely terrifying. To dream that you have to cross a frontier and you've located the place because there is a light, but you must cross a dark forest, and you realize that there is someone with you in the forest, and that person doesn't attack you, but they just start to cling to you. It is terrifying. So what do you think this means? It's a continuation of the first dream. Since she consulted 3 analysts, perhaps she's already very spiritual and that influences our experience. That could be a thing. Navigating unconsciousness towards the self with the shadow. Okay, there is someone who is dragging her down in life. That could be a projection. She finally found her destination, but something is holding her back. That is a possibility. Maybe there's someone in her life keeping her down. Ça montre une lutte contre ses forces inconscientes, mais elle a quand même une avancée malgré les obstacles. So she's trying to fight against the unconscious force. Bonjour, PK. You need to let go of your past to move on. Her subconscious doesn't want her to go back to her trauma. Okay, that I think is a very interesting interpretation. So in this case, you're saying that the unconscious is the madman who's holding on to her in the dark forest, because the dark forest is, as we've already established, an analogy, a symbol for the unconscious. So she's being kept forcefully in the unconscious so as to not reach the conscious. Very interesting. And then we're going to do the third dream, and we're going to then read the interpretation that Jung presented. The third dream took place when the patient came into my hands. It runs, I must cross a frontier, or rather, I have already crossed it, and find myself in a Swiss custom house. I have only a handbag with me, and I believe that I have nothing to declare. But the customs officials dives into my bag, and to my astonishment, pulls out 2 full-sized mattresses. There's actually an Easter egg in the dream. I don't know if you guys can catch it. There's a detail that shouldn't be there and is there for a reason, to show that like dreams make sense, even if they look really weird. Swiss custom house. Why Swiss? Why not like Congolese? Yeah, she's also saying I have a lot of baggage I'm not aware of, because the custom officer is like able to pull Jung is Swiss. The second she started working with him, she immediately had a dream where she was stopped by a custom officer who just happened to be Swiss, because it's a projection of the analyst within her dream. He is the person who is trying to control her baggage, quite literally. Trans-Euro mattress smuggling, yes. She got stopped by Jung. Okay, so whenever I read stuff like this, transference, someone pointed it out. It's transference where the analyst starts to manifest itself in the patient's dream. And it takes the role of a custom officer, because to the patient, that's what you are. That's what, in a sense, you are doing to them. So I continue. The patient married during the course of her treatment with me, but not without a violent resistance to this step. The cause of her neurotic resistance came to light only after many months, and there is not a hint of it anywhere in these dreams. There are, without exception, anticipations of the difficulties she has to have with the analyst to whom she has come for treatment. So, as we saw, there's nothing in the dreams. The dream is literally just her being afraid of reaching the unconscious. When she is finally going to get to the conscious through the unconscious in the dark forest, her unconscious is trying to prevent her from doing so. And when she finally has someone who can help her do so, he is presented in her mind as a custom officer that figures out that she has a bunch of baggage. But the problem that she had, the neurosis in this case, was nothing tangible. It was instead a resistance to the analysis. And this is why Jung told you it is stupid to try and always point out a trauma to explain why people are not doing well in life, because in this case, there is no trauma. It's simply explained by the fact that this woman had anxiety associated with the treatment, and that is it. And the dream was just a manifestation of that, because Jung points it out that the dreams started after she started the analysis. So she came to she came to see these people because she was going to get married and she had difficulties in her life. And whatever dreams she had afterwards was just created by the fact that she went to see these people. So I think that this is also something that we can give Jung. He is very skeptical towards dream analysis because, as he points out, sometimes it's just a reaction of the attempt at analyzing dreams in the first place. At any point, if I'm not clear, because naturally I'm very clear in my own head, but if you think, oh, this is not clear or I'm not understanding, let me know and I'll try to rephrase. So that was to compare one dream with the man with the train that actually should have taken a look at the dream because it was actually a warning from the unconscious, and here a dream being caused by the unconscious itself. The unconscious was the problem. Have you ever done a front lever? Yes. It's crazy how warm I get when I do these streams. A little bit of water. I wonder how many of you guys are going to get dreams tonight. Est-ce que ça montre qu'elle est désormais plus consciente d'elle-même et qu'elle a appris à maîtriser les forces inconscientes? Yes, I think that in this case, this is someone who is going to be less afraid of the unconscious going forward. It could also very well be that she's going to be traumatized. Do you recommend starting with fiction if I didn't read before? Yes. What if the patient is smart, stupid? Will the quality of the unconscious be different? Naturally, because the unconscious is a reflection of you. So it could very well be that stupid patients are going to have very easy dreams to interpret, and very intelligent patients are going to have harder dreams to interpret. But here it's beyond stupidity. It's also the nature of the problem. If the problem is straightforward, you could get straightforward dreams. But that's not even a guarantee, as we'll see later. Sometimes you have problems that are very easy and they manifest in like crazy ways. And sometimes you have problems that are very deep and the dream is super simple. Is this a case of looking for Godot? I mean, this is we're getting deep. But if you think about it, the God and the unconscious is the same. You're in a sense looking for answers and for meaning into something that you don't quite get, that is dark and mysterious. And one could very well argue that if humans weren't gifted with the power to create an unconscious in the first place, we would not have created God. I understand that this is only from the standpoint of someone who believes that God is a creation of the human psyche and not the other way around. Yeah. Jacopo, you have the ability to understand your dreams easily and you can interpret them and point to factors that could have caused them. That's great. I'm very skeptical of the validity of dream interpretation. Good. You're in the right place, my friend, because Jung was also very skeptical as well, as we'll get to see the more we read. So, Jung says that to say that the dreams are unintelligible is a mere reflection of the doctor's subjective opinion. So, if you run into a dream and the dream is nonsensical, it's nonsensical because you don't know enough. I think that's also a very fair way to approach this. Nothing is unclear to the understanding. It is only when we fail to understand that things appear unintelligible and confused. The psychiatrist, likewise, is prone to call a patient confused when he would do well to recognize the projection and admit his own confusion. For it is really his understanding that grows confused in face of the patient's strange behavior. So here, Jung is essentially creating a position for the psychiatrist, the analyst, the therapist, whatever, where you are not allowed to put the blame on the patient. You cannot say, oh, this patient is like, their dreams make no sense. No, this is too easy. C'est beauté en touche, as we say in French. This is a cop-out. If you can figure it out, it's on you. So you have to dive deeper, right? You cannot just let go of it. If you're faced with that woman who dreams she's going through a dark forest and then she dreams that there's a custom officer that finds mattresses in her small bag, you can't just say, well, that's nonsensical. You have to accept that maybe it has a meaning that you don't like. For example, the fact that she's afraid of the analyst, or she's afraid of being psychoanalyzed, or she's afraid of the unconscious. Nothing is more unbearable for the patient than to always be understood. So this might look like a contradiction, but it's not. What he means here is that a lot of people who try to engage in dream analysis, if they cannot understand what the dream means, they'll just project meaning onto it and say, oh, it's this, because they cannot bear to say, I don't understand. So they make shit up. That is also something that must be avoided. And to know when you're making shit up, if you say something to the patient and it doesn't resonate and the patient is like, most likely you're not on it. Because, and this is something that we're going to see if we do a stream where we try to analyze you guys, your dreams. Oftentimes, if I analyze your dream, or if the chat tells you something about your dream and it doesn't like hit, and you're like, well, that doesn't sound real, that doesn't sound like me, most likely it's because the interpretation is not correct. And this is vital for people who are skeptical about dream analysis, because it means that, yeah, dream analysis doesn't have a correct answer. The correct answer is something that is going to make sense to you. So dream analysis is an excuse to look at the unconscious until you find something that the patient is consciously aware is a problem, and finally is able to accept it because you bypassed the ego via the unconscious. As always, I try to plug stuff and it takes forever. I can analyze philosophy like this, but plugging something in a laptop, impossible. Lord, have you read Koku no Ito, The Climber? I highly recommend it. Yes, I have. Yes, I have. It's really good. Okay, I'm going to plug the laptop. If the stream goes down, I apologize. Okay, it didn't go down. All right, let us continue with Jung. So we just established that the analysis is not allowed to project the way he feels onto the dream, and he's not allowed to claim that the dream means nothing. By taking refuge in the doctor's self-confidence and profound understanding, the patient loses all sense of reality, falls into a stubborn transference, and retards the cure. We're getting into the dark side of dream analysis, something that happens a lot, and I'm certain that a lot of you guys who are not versed into dream analysis, when I tell you dream analysis and psychoanalysis, this is the first thing you think. You think a guy, most likely a white guy, an old white guy, who's standing upright with a patient on a couch, and the patient just tells them about, oh, I've dreamt of this, and the guy says, oh yes, it means this and this and this, right? This is why so many people reject dream analysis, because that's not dream analysis, that is pure transference. It's literally the patient looking at the analyst as some sort of guru that is able to just fix their life and is able to just understand the unconscious like this, when in reality all of that is nonsense. It is the analyst making shit up. For the doctor to prejudge the dream from the standpoint of a certain doctrine and to make a pronouncement which may be theoretically sound but does not win the patient's assent is wrong. That's what I just told you. This is why theories of dream analysis must be regarded with a bit of skepticism. If someone tells you spider in a dream is the fear of women, is it? Where is your context for this? You don't know the patient's culture. You can't say that. You have to look at every single aspect of it. And if the patient tells you, no, I'm fine, I'm not afraid of women, you can't tell them, yes, you are, fuck you. It'll be 80 euros, come back next time. No, you have to go back to the drawing board. This is why I like Jung more than I like someone like Freud, for example. Not to say that Freud was bad. It is incorrect in the practical sense to do so, and it may also be incorrect in the sense that it anticipates and thereby cripples the actual development of the patient. Another key part of dream analysis, it should come from the patient. So if you decide that you want to analyze your dream, great, because the only person you need in reality is you. But the meaning should come from the patient. If the meaning comes from whatever interpretation the analyst has, then it is by therefore flawed. If we help the patient to grow up to this truth in the course of his own development, we have reached his heart. And this appeal goes deeper and acts with greater force. And that is also the concept of inception. If you manage to make someone think or believe that an idea came from them, they're going to be much more likely to like the idea. But if it feels like you push the idea on them and are forced to follow it, they're not going to like the idea. It's the same principle with dream analysis. And here I wrote as a note, critic of self-improvement. Because that's also why I love this book so much. It's about dream analysis, but in reality, it's about many other things that surround dream analysis. And let no one deceive himself as to the effects of suggestion. In itself, suggestion is not to be despised, but it has serious limitations and reacts upon the patient's independence of character in a very undesirable way. So here he is talking about stuff like motivation. When you watch a motivation video by David Goggins, you feel motivated, you get shit done, and you think, well, that's good, it's a net positive. Jung tells you, maybe not, because now you are being suggested to. Your motivation becomes a result of you consuming someone else's words. As a result, it imposes serious limitations on your ability to be self-motivated, and you become a motivation junkie. The only way you can get shit done is if you have that outward external stimulus. But guess what? Eventually, that stimulus is going to run its course. It's not going to have its effect anymore. And so you are going to be lost. You will not be able to get shit done. And this is a direct issue when it comes to developing the independence of character of a human. So this is why I say it's so important that you understand that, as Anas says, internal fire is more interesting to develop than external fire, because internal fire is forever. External fire can be doused by the rain, it can be impacted by the weather or the climate. Oh boy. Allez, on continue les enfants. Nike Park. I'm going to read this because it looks important. My brain makes up fake scenarios where I get myself into a horrible life situation that I can't get myself out of. Is my unconscious telling me to be careful? It could be if you can link these fake scenarios with something in life that you're trying to dodge or avoid. It could also just be anxiety. It could just be that whenever nothing is happening and there is calm and homeostasis, your brain freaks out because it's only comfortable with turmoil, and so it creates fake turmoil. You have to have the ability to separate between the two. How did you go about developing your knowledge base? I read a lot, and I read everything. I don't limit myself to philosophy. If I run across an article that I think is interesting about dolphins, I'll read it. I'm a huge proponent of the saying by Musashi, know one thing, know 10,000 things. That is how I live my life. I try to expand outward. So whenever I read something, I try to apply it to other things that I know, and I create this like interconnected network of knowledge. And I think that everyone can do that. It just takes curiosity. I understand that in the modern world, this curiosity is oftentimes sadly taken by social media because your brain storage and your brain energy is limited. So if you give it to random content, then you have none left for this, for the work that is required to gain that knowledge. Hey NH, can you tell my friend Manzib hi? Hi Manzib, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Do you read much physics stuff for my work? Yes. I'm constantly having to read things that I'm not qualified to understand, which in a sense is a good way to develop your intellect. When you read like what did I read recently? Chaos theory and like non-Euclidean geometry, like super advanced math that I know nothing about, and I was forced to write like pages and pages of like concepts and like conventions on these things that are way outside of my reach. It was pretty funny. Ever had experience with sleep paralysis and age? Yes. The first time in my life, I dreamt I was in a train with my mother, and there was an evil spirit in the train, and we were supposed to capture it in a bottle. And my mom like fumbled the cover of the bottle, and so the evil spirit was released. And upon the evil spirit being released, I awoke, and the evil spirit was in the room. It was at the top corner of the bedroom, and it was like a face sticking outside of like a vortex of darkness, and it was like reaching out for me, and I couldn't move. It was horrifying. So that was my first sleep paralysis. And after that, my other sleep paralysis, usually it's like I can sense someone in the room, but I can't move. But now I've learned that if you keep your eyes closed, it's much less frightening. So what I do is that I keep my eyes closed and I wiggle my toes, And if I can get to wiggle my toes, I can move my foot. And if I can move my foot, I can move my leg. And then the sleep paralysis is broken. How many books have you read total? It's impossible to know. I don't want to flex and tell you a number that's not going to be accurate. I don't know. It's in the thousands. What up, what up? So we're doing Jung for the people who are showing up now. And if you are only here, what did you miss? You didn't miss much. We are just continuing on our analysis of Jung and his great work. So we just finished by talking. We just ended up talking about the independence of character and why it's important to be self-motivated. A practicing analyst may be supposed to believe in the significance and value of the widening of consciousness. I mean by this the procedure of bringing to light the parts of the personality which were previously unconscious and subjecting them to conscious discrimination and criticism. It is an undertaking which requires the patient to face his problems and taxes his powers of conscious judgment and decision. It is nothing less than a challenge to the ethical sense, a call to arms that must be answered by the whole personality. Therefore, with respect to personal development, what we call self-improvement, the analytical approach is of a higher order than methods of treatment based upon suggestion. This is a kind of magic that works in the dark and makes no ethical demands upon the personality. Methods of treatment based upon suggestion are deceptive makeshift. They are incompatible with the principles of analytical therapy and should be avoided. So this is a critical paragraph that we're going to get into in a second because I really need to use the bathroom. So I'm going to cover this. And you can use that time to go get a drink and I'll be right back. Ah, motherfucker. I'm back. Oh boy. I'm always gracious. Okay, so let's get back to that paragraph. So we're talking about suggestion, and Jung is telling us that it's not a good idea because it's not a good means to reach self-improvement. Why? The issue with suggestion is that oftentimes you're going to end up with the analyst or the guru or the educator projecting the way he feels onto the patient. In this case, projecting his own values. So when you listen to one of these like masculinity guru, that guy is going to try and turn you into a version of them. because to them, that is what masculinity must be. So, for example, he's going to tell you that to be a man, you must, I don't know, you must be tough. You must never show emotions. Is that guy correct? I would argue he's not, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that he is trying to get you to be the man that he is. And that can never work because it's not based on what the patient or the person needs to improve. It's based on the preconceived notion that improvement is a one-size-fits-all practice that must align exactly with what the guru says. And we know that this is not true. So this is why we always try to stay away from suggestion and instead we prefer individuation, meaning figuring out what you want. When people tell me, hey, how do I become a better man? Good question. What do you think is a good man? What do you think is your ideal version of who you are? What are the traits that this ideal person possesses? Once you figure that out, seek out these traits. You can go further and try and deconstruct why you feel that way, but that's deep down the road. To start to do that is already enough and already plenty. And that is Jungian psychology and philosophy at hand. It's a philosophy of actuation of the individual, of doing things for yourself with the help of someone, in this case, me and this book. But as you can tell, I'm never going to tell you, do this, be that. I will instead give you keys. This is a good therapist, a good psychoanalyst, a good educator gives you keys. He never tells you how to use them or which doors to open. He just gives you the chance and opportunity to do so. The analyst who wishes to rule out conscious suggestion must consider any dream interpretation invalid that does not win the assent of the patient, as we explained before, and he must search until he finds a formulation that does. So the patient is at the center of it. Likewise, a good educator, a good fitness educator, should have the individual that he teaches at the center of it. It's not about my method of training, it's about what could help you get better. Very important, very hard to do, because as subjective creatures and beings, we have a tendency to project. It is said that God made man in his image. In truth, men also make other men in their image, because it's also the will to live and the will to survive. It's not just reproduction. It's also ideological reproduction, to make more and more people think and be and act exactly like us. That is a form of cloning. And it's a form of cloning that is incredibly widespread on social media, unfortunately. I hope that if you decide to be a clone of someone, you don't decide to be a clone of me. There are enough Frenchmen in the world as is. So, it goes without saying that he should hold no preconceived opinion based upon a particular theory, but stand ready in every single case to construct a totally new theory of dreams. So, there is no such thing as a theory of dreams. There is a constantly evolving theory of dreams that applies to every new patient. The view that dreams are merely imaginary fulfillments of suppressed wishes has long ago been superseded. So, Jung rambles. Jung tends to go back on things he already discussed. Oftentimes, I will skip these things, but I think that this is interesting. So here, he's telling us that the notion that a dream is simply, he's not saying it's not, simply the expression of a wish that has not been fulfilled yet is not always the case. Dreams may also give expression to ineluctable truth, to philosophical pronouncements, illusions, wild fantasies, memories, plans, anticipations, irrational experiences, even telepathic visions, and heaven knows what besides. So he's not, again, don't make the mistake of thinking he's giving you a complete list. He included telepathic visions in that list. This means that essentially dreams can be anything. And it's wrong to say they're one thing. Like, for example, it's wrong to say, oh, dreams are always prophetic. No, they can be, given the right context, but not always. One thing we ought never to forget, and this is what I said at the start, but this time it's Jung telling you, almost the half of our lives is passed in a more or less unconscious state when you're asleep. The dream is specifically the utterance of the unconscious. It is a way for your unconscious to speak to you. We may call consciousness the daylight realm of the human psyche and contrast it with the nocturnal realm of unconscious psychic activity, which we apprehend as dreamlike fantasy. Here, allow me to go deeper into something that Jung is not saying. This interpretation of the conscious as the daylight and the unconscious as the dreamlike fantasy and the nightscape is entirely modern. Humans before did not think like this. They did not ascribe a positive value to the conscious because it's during the day, and the unconscious because it's during the night. Actually, many quote unquote, and this is going to be a term that comes back again. I won't explain it today, but it's not pejorative, it's not negative. Many primitive people still hold that true to this day. They hold the unconscious at the same level as the conscious. The reason why we stopped is because we have entered a society, especially in the West, but it's now widespread, that is based on productivity, and you're only productive when you're conscious. And so we naturally think that the conscious is more important because it creates capital. The unconscious products jack shit. If anything, it's detrimental to the production of capital and productivity. And so we have a tendency to look down upon it, which is the reason why modern man is plagued with illnesses, mental illnesses, with neurosis, and with a bunch of symptoms that stem from the unconscious because we have turned our back on it. We are only an hour and 20 minutes into the stream. We are page 10 of that book, and we've already reached that. Okay, this much. Guess what is left here? This is why philosophy is just vital, because you could go your entire life not realizing this. It is certain that consciousness consists not only of wishes and fears, but of vastly more than these. And it is highly probable that the unconscious psyche contains a wealth of content and living forms equal to or even greater than does consciousness. And I would agree here, which is characterized by concentration, limitation, and exclusion. The issue with the conscious is that naturally, you are constantly also dealing with your ego, and your ego focuses on certain things, rejects certain things, has taboos, thinks certain things cannot possibly happen, which is not true with the unconscious. You can fly in your dreams. Why? Because your dream is not limited and your unconscious is not limited by the laws of physics. It just refuses to accept it. So it's free. You are at your freest when you're asleep. That being the state of affair, it is imperative that we should not pare down the meaning of a dream to fit some narrow doctrine. It is hard to realize how badly we are fooled by the abuse of ideas. It even seems as if the unconscious had a way of strangling the physician in the cause of his own theory. Nietzschean philosophy and Jungian psychology go hand in hand. This is also something that Nietzsche discusses all the time. To not let yourself be fooled by ideas, by great concepts and theories that prevent you from perceiving reality for what it is. They become a scope and they become a lens through which you can no longer perceive reality because you are adding bias onto your own bias. And that's something that we don't want. Okay, a bit of a break. I'm going mental. I'm just going to read some of your comments. I'm going to drink some juice. If you want to use primitive in positive ways, you could say primordial. That is correct. The issue is that Jung says primitive. What page are we on? We're page 12. And H, I know this is not related, but do you do anything to maintain the ability to read, speak French? I teach French. I have students online that I teach French to, and I read books in French. Actually, just before this stream, I was teaching French. Donc, les concepts jungiens de l'inconscient et des archétypes se s'harmonisent avec la notion nietzschéenne du surhomme et de la montée de puissance. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. When we killed God, did we bury the unconscious too? I think one would argue that the unconscious died before God, and that it was, in a sense, what was going to lead to the death of God. Thank you, Funky Harrison. Means a lot. Isn't the unconscious also the shadow? No. The shadow and shadow work is done via the unconscious, but they're not the same thing. How do we apply to learn French? I don't have any spots open. I already work pretty much 7 days a week. As we became secular and left religion behind, it makes sense that we went away from the unconscious Two of the most vital moments in the Bible and Christian theory is very closely related to dreams. Yes. Is it the case that today's people have more illness, or that old era had more illness just never addressed because old days were batshit crazy? Yes. But see, here is the thing. When we say old days, what are we talking about? In reality, we're talking about the 1910s, 1920s, up until the 50s, 60s, when mental health was starting to like boom again. Before that, there was no clinical development of psychology or psychiatry, but I would argue that most people are much more in touch with the unconscious back then. I think that the modern world has separated us, and this is why this is even needed. Because we are modern men and women in search of a soul. We need that vector, and we need that doctrine to help us reaccess something that we used to have. A lot of the things that Jung talks about, if you look back at oral tradition of like, again, primitive people, they already spoke about that 1,000 years ago. They knew that. And back then, it was oral tradition. Everyone knew that. Stuff like this is not consumed by the majority of humans. The majority of humans will never be aware of how important the unconscious is. And as Jung says a lot, it also means that their life is going to be directed and dictated by the unconscious, but they'll never figure it out. Couldn't biblical stories be a mirror of the unconscious? I personally read biblical stories as this. It's like dream analysis. You're looking for meaning in something that doesn't seem to have meaning at first glance. Jung also says that the unconscious is a collective. What does that mean? So here, and this is a theory that is not developed in this book in particular, but we'll talk about it as like a theme, a background theme. Sorry, the collective unconscious is the idea that the creation of the unconscious, is, as we explained, a physiological factor, okay, just like the development of the lungs. And just like with the development of the lungs, your lungs work just like my lungs, even though they don't look exactly the same and are not exactly as performant. Why? It's a function of the species. So if our lungs function the same, it's likely that our unconscious also functions more or less the same, because we are both humans and we developed that factor and that ability to survive. So this also must mean that there is a common ground. If there is a study of medical science that can tell you exactly how a lung functions, one also exists for the unconscious. But when it comes to the collective unconscious, we're talking about the collective amalgamation of everyone's unconscious, because we all draw from the same place. All of our unconscious are connected because we develop them in the same environment. This means that there is a collective unconscious for the African continent that might be different than from the European continent. There are still similarities, but the cultural differences are going to make a difference. Oh yeah, I mean, it is metaphysical in a sense, but like, it's not just a concept that like vanishes in thin air. It has an application. We can use it. And that's Jungian philosophy. How has the modern world affected the mind of man? How many hours do you have? Couldn't I just separate myself from modern society and recover back to normal? No, because you are the fruit and you are the product of that. You are modern man, and you will never stop being modern man. So even if you were to go live in the woods, your brain and your unconscious are still the ones of a modern man. Oh, you're so real about this book and came here? Well, read the book, please. Do not consume philosophy in like bite-sized format. Even that is like a regressive, restrictive interpretation of Jungian philosophy. Jungian philosophy, and any philosophy in reality, must be read. The author spent time and they sacrificed their lives to write books. So, read the books. I'm a girl, should I read it too? You have an unconscious, you're a human, so yes, read it. All right, let us continue. So I stopped here, then I skipped a bunch here, yes. Every hypothesis about the nature of the dream, its function and structure, is merely a rule of thumb and must be subject to constant modification. Yes, that's what we already said. And he concludes by saying, and I love that so much because it applies to so many aspects of life, do anything you like, only don't try to understand it. And I think this also applies to fitness to a great degree, because I think that if you do fitness and you try to get too much into the nitty gritties of it, you will forget what works. And we see that so much with the science-based creators who push all of these like notions when in reality it's very simple. Go to the gym, do hard sets, and you will grow. I'm not talking, of course, for an anti-intellectualism approach to fitness. I'm just saying sometimes you just need to fucking lift. They give associations in accordance with a theory. Here he's talking about the bad analyst. That is, and he's also talking about the bad fitness influencers. That is, they try to understand and interpret, and thus they nearly always get stuck. Like the doctor, they wish at once to get behind the dream in the false belief that it is a mere facade, concealing the true meaning. So this is what we explained previously, where some analysts perceive the dream as a simple symptom that must be, in a sense, pushed to access the trauma, to access the truth. They don't see that it's the key to solving the problem of the patient, and that if you dismiss the dream, you dismiss the patient. Perhaps we may call the dream a facade, but we must remember that the fronts of most houses by no means trick or deceive us, but on the contrary, follow the plan of the building and often betray its inner arrangement. Jung was gifted for analogies, and are super efficient, super quick. He's saying here that when you look at the front of a house, okay, yeah, it's the front, it's a facade, it's not the inside of the house that actually matters. But by looking at the outside, you know the complete details of the inside. You can tell that there are 2 bedrooms upstairs. You can tell that the door is here, so the corridor is here. Most likely the living room is here. Most likely the bathroom is here. That is the dream. The dream is the facade to the unconscious. But if you refuse to go through the facade and open the door, good luck getting to the unconscious. If you refuse to open the door of the house, good luck getting into the house. He then says something that I'm going to repeat because it's important when it comes to understanding what a dream is. The manifest dream picture is the dream itself and contains the latent meaning. If I find sugar in the urine, it is sugar and not a facade that conceals albumin. So he's saying here that this is the equivalent of, and this is like old school, but like finding sugar in the urine of a patient, which should be the sign that the person has diabetes, and saying, well, it's just urine. It means nothing. Okay, you'll never diagnose the fact that the patient has diabetes because you refuse to look at the symptoms or what they are. We say that the dream had a false front only because we failed to see into it. So again, when you don't understand something, it's very easy to just say, oh, it means nothing. It doesn't exist. Okay, this I'm not going to read because it's a bit complex. And he's getting into linguistics, which is not the topic at hand. Every interpretation is hypothetical, for it is a mere attempt to read an unfamiliar text. An obscure dream taken by itself can rarely be interpreted with any certainty, so that I attach little importance to the interpretation of single dreams. With a series of dreams, we can have more confidence in our interpretations, for the later dreams correct the mistakes we have made in handling those that went before. So, very important, new chapter. He's saying here that a dream is just a parcel of the unconscious, and that looking at a dream in isolation usually reveals nothing, because it's just a portion of what the patient thinks. It's a portion of the symptom. You must have several dreams, and if you have several dreams, you'll be able to like look at them in comparison to one another, and that is going to give you much better information. And he goes on as to say that sometimes this practice is a matter of life and death, and this also goes against the idea that dream analysis is silly. There have been multiple cases of people who had illnesses, actual problems that would have killed them, that could not be diagnosed with modern medicine, that dream analysis allowed to save, because it allowed for a diagnosis to be reached. And we're going to actually look at one of such cases after I drink some water. And I don't think you're too stupid to understand linguistics. It's just that when he starts to talk to you about a table, and I know it's a table because table is the significant and blah 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 blah, it's not needed. Like I don't want to overcomplicate something that is already so complex. Do you agree with Jung's assessment of Nietzsche? I would need to read it. I've what is the term? I've interacted with only a select amount of Jung writings because I wanted to make sure that this ends up being the first one that we cover together. All right. So we are going to discuss another dream from a patient that Jung analyzed and helped. And we will see that in this case, indeed, it was a matter of life and death. The man had dreamed as follows. I'm climbing a high mountain over steep, snow-covered slopes. I'm on higher and higher. It is marvelous weather. The higher I climb, the better I feel. I think, if only I could go on climbing like this forever. When I reach the summit, my happiness and elation are so strong that I feel I could mount right up into space. And I discover that I actually can. I go on climbing on empty air. I awake in a real ecstasy. What does it mean? This is such a positive dream. What do you think it means? All right, someone says he could be an addict. I think you have a point. You notice that I did not give you the background of that person on purpose. The man climbs and climbs and climbs the mountain. He's feeling better and better the more he climbs. And when he's at the top of the mountain, he starts to reach into the skies. Think about the symbolism of what it means. He starts to elevate into the skies. Spiritual elevation, okay. He is self-improving, but to what end? Somebody being very careless. Interesting. Dean Shepard points out something interesting. Yeah. The dream looks positive, but what we see is someone who is what is the term? Who is so engrossed in the pleasure he feels that he's no longer paying attention. He's just climbing because he wants more of that pleasure. He wants to die, okay? He's reaching a form of enlightenment. Okay, Ramash, you're putting something interesting here. The symbolism of him at the top of the mountain going into space is a form of death. In the collective unconscious of Western populations that are mostly Christian, it's a form of death. All right. So you guys gave a lot of very good interpretations. Let's see. When he had told me his dream, and this is Jung speaking, I said, my dear man, I know you can't give up mountaineering because the man was a mountaineer, but let me implore you to not go alone from now on. When you go, take 2 guides, and you must promise on your word of honor to follow their directions. Incorrigible, the man replied laughing, and said goodbye. I never saw him again. 2 months later came the first blow. Went out alone, he was buried by an avalanche, but was dug out in the nick of time by a military patrol. 3 months after this, the end came. He went on a climb accompanied by a younger friend, but without guides. An alpinist standing below saw him literally step out into the air as he was letting himself down a rock wall. He fell onto the head of his friend who was waiting beneath him, and both were dashed to pieces far below. So, for those of you who said that he was being careless, it's exactly that. The dream was a warning by the unconscious saying, hey, you go mountain climbing, but you don't pay attention to what you're doing. You go without guides, and you are not actually following safety principles. You love this because you're an adrenaline junkie, but this does not mean that it's good for you. So in the dream, the guy was feeling good, but he was not looking at what the dream was trying to tell him, which is, what you're doing is going to eventually lead to your death. And Jung immediately understood that and told him, hey, don't do that anymore. Go with guides, go with safety. And the guy laughed in his face, saying, well, no, I'm having such a good time. Such a good time that 3 months later, the guy was dead. And we see again that this connects previously to what Jung was telling us, that the ego keeps getting in the way of the interpretation of dreams because the guy was swallowed by an avalanche, showing, hey, if you're swallowed by an avalanche in your mountaineering, it's because you're going off tracks and you're doing something wrong to start with. He didn't die on that day. He kept going until he eventually died. And Jung concludes that was ecstasis in the full meaning of the word. The guy died of pleasure. He died by doing something that he enjoyed so much that he lost sight of the consequences to his health. As bodybuilders, we can relate. That's what happens to PED and PED users. But what if this was cherry-picked by Jung? Oh, it is 100% cherry-picked by Jung. He only speaks about the cases that are influential and align with what he's trying to tell us. He's saying that dream analysis is sometimes a matter of life and death, and he's giving you one example. There are many examples where the dreams don't actually mean anything, but these are not interesting here. Often enough, dreams appear senseless, but it is obviously we who lack the sense and the ingenuity to read the enigmatical message from the nocturnal realm of the psyche. When we see that at least a half of man's life is passed in this realm, that consciousness has its roots there and not the other way around, and that the unconscious operates in and out of waking existence, it would seem incumbent upon medical psychology to sharpen its perception by a systematic study of dreams. No one doubts the importance of conscious experience. Why then should we question the importance of unconscious happenings? So this is, in a sense, the conclusion to the paragraph and the entire thing. Well, I was going to say Nietzsche. Jung proved the importance of dream analysis and concludes by saying, interestingly enough, no one seems to give a fuck, and it's not a scientific field at all. Why? Because it's connected to the unconscious. And because we seem to despise the unconscious and we only care about conscious symptoms, it's ignored even though it could literally save lives. Crocs, someone named Crocs, whose profile picture is not a croc at all, but actually a shoe with a heel, so you're a liar. What if someone with self-hatred gets a warning dream? Or maybe you are a shoe with a heel that identifies as a croc, in which case you have my support. What if someone with self-hatred gets a warning dream? Would their reaction be the side of the same coin with the egoistical example, and then they're going to say it's a Photoshop Crocs, so I'm wrong. So someone with self-hatred, okay, so gets a warning dream. Would our reaction be the same? That's so interesting because they hate themselves, but where the hate comes from is the conscious. It doesn't necessarily mean that the unconscious is on board with the hate. So the unconscious could still be a healthy, benevolent agent trying to save the person from ending up killing themselves for some reason because of their self-hatred. It could also be that the unconscious is on board. That's, again, it's all part of the context. And so that was the conclusion. And here we're going to start to get into the topic of the shadow. Okay, someone asked earlier, is the unconscious the same as the shadow? No, but your shadow self hides in the unconscious. So shadow work, and this is why I opened with dream analysis and why Jung opened his book with dream analysis, because he has to make you understand how important the unconscious is, because this is where the work has to be done. Dreams give information about the secrets of the inner life and reveal to the dreamer hidden factors of his personality. So there are aspects of yourself you don't understand or even know about, but they're included in you. Just because you're not aware doesn't mean that they're not that they're not there. They're just hidden in the unconscious. That's your shadow. As long as these are undiscovered, they disturb the waking life and betray themselves only in the form of symptoms. This means that we cannot effectively treat the patient from the side of consciousness alone, but must bring about a change in and through the unconscious. As far as present knowledge goes, there is only one way of doing this. There must be a thoroughgoing conscious assimilation of unconscious contents. I read this already. I have read this already. And this is the paragraph that I spoke to you before. And as I was reading it, I was getting this deja vu. How many people caught it? But yeah, I read it again because it's so important. It's this interpenetration of the conscious and the unconscious that I brought forth when someone asked about the shadow self. Someone says, I love you, Mr. Trophy. I love you too, my friend Fred Birk. What a weird name. All right, let us continue. I wrote on the page, the monster inside us, which in itself is a good and evil interpretation of the shadow. Don't do that. The shadow is not a monster. The shadow is you. So you are the monster in a sense. As to the value and significance of unconscious contents in general, very mistaken views are abroad. It is well known that the Freudian school presents the unconscious in a thoroughly depreciatory light, just as also it looks on primitive man as little better than a wild beast. You understand here that Jung thinks the exact opposite. In Jung's opinion, primitive man is not inferior to modern man. He is just a previous version of us that knows things that we forgot. Its nursery tells about the terrible old man of the tribe and its teachings about the infantile perverse criminal unconscious have led people to make a dangerous monster out of the unconscious, that really very beautiful natural thing. So this is not an indictment on Freudian philosophy or psychology. Jung is just saying that, unfortunately, in the collective conscious and unconscious of modern humans, when you talk about the unconscious, people think, oh yeah, that thing that's like contains only sexual perversion and like makes you into a monster that is going to molest old ladies. Unfortunately, that's what many people think. And so therefore, naturally, when you tell them that, and when they think like this, they think, well, I don't want to touch that thing with a stick because it's like where monsters hide. And this is why these people remain incomplete, because there is a lot of taboo surrounding the unconscious. But as Jung goes on to say, the unconscious is a natural thing. Natural as in every single human has an unconscious. That's for a reason. It can't just be, and I will use that analogy a ton, it cannot just be that the unconscious is a garbage can where all of our negative inclinations are thrown into. How much sense would that be? L'inconscient n'est pas une vésicule. It's not an organ that is going to just filter all of the garbage. It is more than this. It is, well, the things that you don't want to deal with go, not the things that are not to be dealt with. Massive distinction here. As if all that is good, reasonable, beautiful, and worth living for had taken up its abode in consciousness. So here is saying that the whole of creation is not the result of the conscious, because so much of the conscious is dictated by the unconscious. Civilization is not just the result of conscious rational choices by men, because these choices were motivated by their unconscious. And here we touch onto a topic that is the spirit of a people. Why do the Greeks and why did the Greeks produce such philosophy, such monuments, such art? Because they had a collective unconscious, the Greek collective unconscious, that is responsible for all of this. This is where culture came from. And yes, culture influences the unconscious, but the unconscious also influences culture. It's a give and take. Have the horrors of the World War really not opened our eyes? Are we still unable to see that man's conscious mind is even more devilish and perverse than the unconscious? So here he is saying and pointing out the obvious, which is it's incredibly hypocritical to point out that the unconscious as this like realm of monsters when you look at what men do when they're fully conscious. We massacre each other, right? That you can't blame the unconscious for that. That's us fully awake in daylight doing that. And maybe we would be able to understand why we do such things if we took a good look at the unconscious. I was recently reproached with the charge that my teaching about the assimilation of the unconscious, were it accepted, would undermine culture and exalt primitivity at the cost of our highest values. So essentially, some civilization fanboys told Jung, hey, your entire idea of the unconscious and the fact that we have to integrate it is going to turn us back into beasts, and we're going to like no longer be modern, and civilization is going to die. Such an opinion can have no foundation other than the erroneous belief that the unconscious is a monster. Such a view arises from fear of nature, super Nietzschean take, where he's pointing out that these people who tend to also be the types to use natural fallacy, appeal to nature fallacies, also don't seem to understand that what they fear so much is actually very natural. Freud has invented the idea of sublimation to save us from the imaginary clause of the unconscious, but what actually exists cannot be alchemistically sublimated, and if anything is apparently sublimated, it never was what a false interpretation took it to be. Hyper-complex for no reason, but essentially what he's saying is what I just explained, that culture is the result of the unconscious. And so to do away with the unconscious, to be able to let culture be its purest expression, its natural expression, is antithetical. It makes no sense. The unconscious is not a demonic monster, but a thing of nature that is perfectly neutral as far as moral sense, meaning that any interpretation of the unconscious as bad is just our projection of morality. But in itself, the unconscious is neither good nor bad. Aesthetic taste and intellectual judgment go. It is dangerous only when our conscious attitude towards it becomes hopelessly false. So you see what Jung is pointing out here. He's pointing out that the very people who advocate against understanding the unconscious as a natural, neutral thing are the very people who created a monster of the unconscious because they refuse to understand it. They have created their own self-fulfilling prophecy. When you ignore that part of your being, yes, it darkens, it becomes a dark forest, and then from the dark forest comes forth monsters. But if you install lights in the forest, you control what comes from it, and the monsters can be integrated into your personality, and that is individuation. Okay, let's take a step back. I'm getting deep into the text. I just want to see if you guys are following. They attempted to cancel Jung. The cancel culture is not new. Do you think the unconscious is directly caused by the denial of death? The denial of death is a consequence of parts of what is contained within the unconscious, because fear of death is part of the natural existence of man. That becomes free will debate, and I'm on the side of free will. Likewise, as Jung they are interchangeable in my mind. As Nietzsche used to say, people who believe in free will are idiots, and people who don't believe in free will are cowards. Pick one. I prefer to be an idiot. Est-ce que les rêves sont faits seulement pour être interprétés et nous donner des indices? Do you think that dreams only function is to give us indication? No. It can just also be purely hedonistic. It's possible you will have a dream that will just make you feel good because your brain or psyche needed to feel good in that moment. They serve multiple functions. I have dreams about so we have Jim on 10 who has a Najime no Ippo profile picture, so we know he's a good guy. I have dreams about my childhood friends all the time, even though I haven't seen them in years. What do you think this is? I think that it's very easy to understand and interpret. I think you miss them. So it could be what I just said before. You miss them and your brain wants to be able to relive these moments. So since it cannot relive them in the conscious, it relieves them in the unconscious. And that also could point out to you missing these people and needing to reconnect in the conscious. Elgi Tobiason, the unconscious can become a monster if you repress the perceived unwanted ideas and feelings out of your conscious, and the unconscious reminds you quite harshly of these matters. It's exactly also what Jung was saying previously, that if you suppress the unconscious, it's going to express itself via symptoms. So it's telling you, hey, you either listen to me or you're going to suffer. But either way, you're going to listen. Porky Orpheus, hello. Thoughts on reading the Iliad? Maybe. I believe claiming something should be backed down by proof. Until now, I saw no proof. Yeah, okay. I mean, there are studies, if you're interested, about dream analysis. But dream analysis will never be understood by science as we understand science. Meaning that you will never have this in a dream means this. Jung explains why it's not possible. Jacked and stoic, I sometimes have dreams about fights, stuff like protecting the home from invaders, but sometimes it's just a summary of recent interesting thoughts. Nothing tops reading Jung at 3 in the night going full schizo. Yes. Let us continue. So we just spoke about the unconscious and the blatant attempt at painting it as some sort of demon factory when it's not that at all. As the process of assimilation goes on, so the unconscious and the conscious diverge into one another, it puts an end to the dissociation of the personality and to the anxiety that attends and inspires the separation of the two realms of the psyche. That which my critic feared, I mean the overwhelming of consciousness by the unconscious, is most likely to occur when the unconscious is excluded from life by repression or is misunderstood and depreciated. So, what Jung is saying is that the only way where the unconscious can become a monster and take over the conscious is if you ignore it. If you actually pay attention to it and you study it and you integrate it, the conscious and the unconscious balance itself out, which is what they were always supposed to be doing. Now, this is a Jungian interpretation of mental illness. Understand that. You might disagree with that. But what he's pointing out is that it's not surprising at all that in the modern world, so many people would have mental issues and neurosis because we also live in the era where the unconscious is ignored. It's a consequence, it's a natural consequence of an inability to understand one's own self. And this is where we get into the physiological nature of the psyche. The psyche is a self-regulating system that maintains itself in equilibrium as the body does. So he's telling, just like your heart works with your lungs, just like your bladder works with your kidney, all of this exists for one reason, to keep you alive. It's to keep your blood pressure level. It's to keep the pH of your blood level. It's to make sure that the contents of sugar in your blood stay the same. You don't become either hypoglycemic or hypoglycemic. All of that exists just to create homeostasis. The psyche is the same. That is why we have survived as a species. Every process that goes too far, so that breaks the balance, immediately and inevitably calls forth a compensatory activity. Okay, this is for people who wanted science. This is science, my dudes. Right? If you end up with hypoglycemic levels of sugar in your bloodstream, this is the sign that most likely your pancreas is not able to produce enough. What is the term in English? Putain. Oh, le connard. Oh, le connard. Insulin, thank you, insulin. And so you have a direct consequence right there. The balance was broken. Likewise, with the creation of symptoms and neurosis in the psyche. Without such adjustments, a normal metabolism would not exist. Without the ability of the body to tell you, hey, there's something going wrong, this is a sign, it's a symptom, fix it, you would die. And likewise, with a normal psyche would not be able to exist without the unconscious serving that function. The relation between conscious and unconscious is compensatory. It's a balance. This fact, you can disagree. In my opinion, it's a fact which is easily verifiable, affords a role for dream interpretation. It is always helpful when we set out to interpret a dream to ask, what conscious attitude does it compensate? So here we get into like the nitty-gritty of things. When you have a dream that is recurrent and a symptom of a neurosis, oftentimes it exists as a way to compensate a conscious attitude. We saw that with the man that was way too ambitious in his day-to-day life. The dream was trying to slow him down. We saw that with the guy who was climbing mountains and not being safe. The unconscious was trying to get him to be safer. It was put forth to correct an imbalance in the conscious life that was going to lead to potential death for the patient. We know that we do not conquer thirst by repressing it. The dream content is to be taken in all seriousness as something that has actually happened to us. It should be treated as a contributory factor in framing our conscious outlook. Conscious and unconscious are not separated. What the unconscious tells you is what is not present right now in the conscious to create homeostasis. If anyone should set out to replace his conscious outlook by the dictates of the unconscious, and this is the prospect which my critics find so alarming. So in a sense, again, to go back to the status of just beast, which again is a misunderstanding of the unconscious to start with, because these people seem to think that the unconscious is your instinct. It's not as simple as that. But anyways, let me continue. Jung continues, he would only succeed in repressing the former, and it would reappear as an unconscious compensation. So that is also the paradox of doing exactly that. Jung tells us that if someone was, for some reason, like a Jung fanboy, but at the same time didn't understand Jung at all, and they try to replace the conscious outlook with the dictates of the unconscious, so they become a completely unconscious being, what would happen is that what we call unconscious would become that person's conscious, and that person would then develop an unconscious as an unconscious compensation for the unconscious becoming the conscious. Does that make sense? There are two factors here, conscious and unconscious. They always must exist. If you crumble the conscious and you make the unconscious replace it, this becomes the new conscious, and magically a new unconscious appears, because balance must be maintained. So the entire point of this argument is to show that it's not even possible. You cannot have one and not the other. The unconscious would thus have changed its face and completely reversed its position, which is what I just explained. And so you can't fully integrate your shadow. In that, you cannot become your shadow, because you are your shadow. So in a sense, once you, quote unquote, fully integrate your shadow, then you are yourself. You have finally become yourself. But the elements of the unconscious that will constantly try to create homeostasis will constantly reoccur. In the sense, and in that sense, you are correct, you can never fully complete shadow work, because as long as you exist as a human, there is more to be done. You can continue the individuation and the the assimilation of the unconscious as long as you're alive. So that is also something to point out here, is that if you apply Jungian philosophy in the sense of self-improvement, well, self-improvement is never ending. Someone asked, this is philosophy stream, right? I think that the past 5 minutes would have told you that yes, because we essentially split hairs for very simple concepts. Can you say a random sentence in German? Ich mag Kartoffelsalat und ich mag Schmetterling. Please do not enter the shadow realm. You will never come back. I spent 8 years studying German, and my German is horrible. What a waste of time. Cool language too. I just didn't pay attention in class. Come to Germany. I went to Germany once, to the Dark Forest. Ça porte bien son nom, cette merde. Hein? Dark Forest. Perfect name for it. I have never seen a coldest place in my life. Holy fuck. Like, if you live there, I respect you, because I would get up at like 6 a.m. to go to class. It was dark, like the inside of my asshole outside, and cold. I've lived in places that were like minus 30. It wasn't like, the feeling of cold is not the same. In the Dark Forest, it was really, really bad. It was pretty though. I just want to point out the fact that you guys like to drink warm orange juice. What is wrong with you? I thought that the Brit bongs were weird already with our cuisine and our cooked beans, but you guys drink orange juice that you warm up. At least where I went. What city were you in? I don't remember. Do you upload live streams to your channel playlists? Not the playlist, but if you click on the live, you find every single live. German cuisine, French... No. You can't say that German cuisine is superior to French cuisine. That's ridiculous. Onion soup sorbos and warm orange juice. I'm going to ban you from the stream. No, it was really like, when they handed me that warm glass of orange juice, I looked at the guy like, I hope this is a prank. I hope you guys don't actually drink this, and this is just a way to aze the French kid, because this is terrible. German bread is better than French bread. Wow. German kebab. Okay, kebab is German cuisine now? Really? If you have to resort to kebab to say that your cuisine is better than mine, you've already lost the argument. It's Turkish. It's not German. It's insane. How dare you say that? It was invented by a Turk in Germany, sure. Mm-hmm. And sushi is French. Did you know that? Because it was invented by a Japanese guy in Paris. Incredible. People say that the unconscious creates monsters. They don't see that chat, clearly. Somebody is claiming that sushi is Norwegian. You guys fight among yourself. Like, jeez. I can tell you one thing, though. Fries are French. The Belgians will tell you that we stole that from them. Technically, Belgian is an extension of French. I mean, they don't know it, but they belong to us. Anyways, Switzerland also. All right. Sorry for that little interlude. The unconscious itself does not harbor explosive materials, but it may become explosive owing to the repressions exercised by a self-sufficient or cowardly conscious outlook. So, if you think that the conscious wood is all that you need, or if you're a coward and you're afraid of actually looking into the dark forest, then yeah, the unconscious becomes very dangerous. It should now be clear why I have made it a practical rule always to ask, before trying to interpret a dream, what conscious attitude does it compensate? As may be seen, I just bring the dream into the closest possible connection with the conscious state. This is very important. That way you don't just end up with word salad that means nothing. You connect the two. I even maintain that it is impossible to interpret a dream with any degree of certainty unless we know what the conscious situation is. So a good analyst, if you want to analyze your dreams for yourself, for example, you cannot just look at the unconscious. You have to look at the conscious environment and context that the person is in, and then you relate it to the unconscious. The unconscious by itself is not sufficient. The dream is not an isolated psychic event completely cut off from daily life. Yes, the dream is your psyche digesting information from your daily life and then creating something. Even if it looks outlandish, it's not. It's literally just the consequence of your daily life and your daily context. And then we're going to get into another example of a dream that I like a lot. And I want to see what you guys were thinking, but someone in the chat asked. So, as you can tell, we're not doing questions today. The philosophy streams are just going to be this. It's self-contained. But if you so happen to enjoy the stream and you want to support the channel, you can do so in the link pinned in the description. And if you are already supporting, I appreciate you a lot. All right. So, and this link is also going to be important if you're going to attend future streams, because next week we're going to do a program review. In the future, I'm going to be doing physique reviews where I'm going to allow you to send pictures and videos of yourself. I'm going to critique your physique, tell you which body parts you need to develop and spend more time on, etc., etc. For the self-improvement, I take questions. For the dating Q&As, I also take questions. Elge, I hope I pronounced your name properly. Did you also experience a massive increase in frequency and vividness of dreams after reading Jung on dreams? No, I would say yes, a massive increase in meaningfulness of dreams. My dreams started making a lot more sense, but I guess it's because now I have the weapons to understand it. All right, you guys ready? I'm going to read the dream of a patient to you guys, and we're going to see if with the 2 hours you got of Jungian philosophy and psychology, you can interpret it. A young man brought me the following dream. My father is driving away from the house in his new car. He drives very clumsily, and I get very excited about his apparent stupidity. He goes this way and that, forward and backward, repeatedly getting the car into a tight place. Finally, he runs into a wall and badly damages the car. I shout at him in a perfect rage, telling him he ought to behave himself. My father only laughs, and then I see that he is dead drunk. What could that mean? With that little information, you know nothing about the guy, you know nothing about the father. What could that mean? Ramash says he thinks he can do better than his father. He also doesn't like his father, okay? Daddy issues. I think we are dealing with a case of daddy issues here. He is now the dad. He has become the dad. So before the accident, the guy was elated by his father's clumsy driving. Yes, when the guy sees that his dad is driving erratically, he's excited by it. What could that mean? Why would you be excited by seeing your dad putting himself in danger like that? Maybe the dad is childish, and that is. But see, keep that in mind, okay? I just told you, and Jung insists that every single dream must be interpreted as a compensation for conscious activity. So if the dad was childish in everyday life, what would be the point of having a dream where your dad is childish? It serves no point. So thinking about this for a second, if the dad is childish in the dream, what is it making up for in conscious life? The guy is too strict. Okay, maybe the dad is too strict. Okay, maybe in reality he is under the shadow of the dad, and so the dream is a way for him to like finally have some power over him. The dad is boring and reliable, so in the dream he is quote unquote fun and crazy. And dad is neglectful. He thinks he can change someone when he can't. The son is insecure. I think you are onto something, TD. He wants love. I don't see where the guy wants love in the dream. The dad is maybe an authoritarian, and so the kid is compensating by being the authority in the dream. Okay, the kid might be in competition with the dad and happy when the dad fails. I'm going to unplug the laptop. I hope that the stream is not going to go down. We're good. Okay. So you guys gave your interpretations. You had time to think about it. Let's see what Jung has to say about that. First off, I'm going to read the opening here because it's important. There is no foundation in fact for the dream. Right? The dream looks completely illogical. The dreamer is convinced that his father would never behave in that way even if he were drunk. So the dream is completely unrealistic. The dreamer himself is used to cars. He is a careful driver and very moderate in the use of alcohol. This means that the dad would never behave like that in real life. All right, so that's a very important hint. The son's the son's relation to the father is good. So we know that there is no actual problem between the two. The dad is not abusive, and the son loves the dad very much. He admires him for being an unusually successful man. We can say, without any attempt at interpretation, that the dream presents a very unfavorable picture of the father. So this is what we know. In the dream, the dad is a complete jerk-off. But in real life, the dad is a great guy and the son loves him very much. That is very confusing. Why would you dream of your dad being like that when it's not true? And it seems that it serves no purpose because you don't hold resentment towards your dad. Jung says, this is your actual relation to your father. This is the interpretation that many people would make. Some of you guys made it in the chat saying, well, maybe it's the sign that the dad is a jerk off in real life. No, wrong. Because that is not understanding the compensatory nature of the dream. So here we have to instead look at the conscious and the unconscious and the information that we got from both. Has the young man resistances to his father, after all, which are perhaps fed by jealousy or a certain sense of inferiority? But before we go out of our way to burden his conscience, we had better for once drop the question of why he had the dream and ask ourselves instead, what for? Again, what is the function of the dream? We just have accepted that it seems to have no function. But here, his father is doing exactly what his dad is supposed to do, and that is creating a complex in the son. The young man actually deserves the French sobriquet of fils à papa. He's a daddy's boy. And that has nothing to do with his dad. It is his relationship to his dad. So the dad is completely accessory in the dream. The dad is, in a sense, it's a projection of how the son feels about the dad. It has nothing to do with the dad himself. His father is still too much the guarantor of his existence. And someone said that in the chat. And he's still living what I call a provisional life. So to be able to free himself from the influence of his dad, he has to create a version of his dad in his head that would not be worthy of that respect, that he could dominate so as to free himself from his influence. This is why the unconscious manufactures a kind of blasphemy. It seeks to lower the father and to elevate the son. This is the complexity of dreams and of dream analysis. It was very tempting to just say, well, maybe the dad is an idiot, or maybe the son doesn't like the dad. But no, it's the opposite. The son likes the dad too much. The dad is like a god in the eyes of the son. And because of that, the son cannot become a man. He's restricted in his evolution because he's kept under the shadow of this person he respects too much. So what does the unconscious do to make up for this problem in the conscious? It creates a blasphemy of a dream. Well, for once, the son gets to feel superior to the dad so as to elevate himself and free himself from something he was not able to free himself from in the conscious existence. Without a knowledge of the conscious situation, meaning the relationship to the dad, the true meaning of the dream would have remained in doubt. It is of the first importance for the assimilation of dream contents that no violence be done to the real values of the conscious personality. If the conscious personality is destroyed or even crippled, there is no one left to do the assimilating. If Jung had came into this entire scenario telling the son, yeah, this is how you feel about the dad, this is the situation, he would have never figured it out, and the son would have never been able to understand what the dream meant. This is doing violence to the dream, this is doing violence to the unconscious, and is not doing anyone any favor. So that becomes the object of severance from the dad himself. Yes. I check coffee every time I can, usually every single week when I make a stream. That's what I said before, where I sometimes see my brother as stupid despite liking him. Mostly became my older brother, got all of the attention when we were kids. Okay, so you grew up in a household where your brother was the golden child, and you still like your brother, but this situation is making you resentful, and so the unconscious gives you the occasion to view the guy as an idiot. Why wouldn't he be inspired by his dad? He is inspired. That's the entire problem. He is so inspired by him that he's not able to outstep him in a sense. He lives in his shadow. And so to be able to free himself from the shadow, he has to have the ability to view himself as competent, as an equal. But the conscious life did not give him that because the dad was super successful. And on top of that, a loving dad. He didn't even have the ability to say, oh, my dad is abusive. No, he had nothing. So the unconscious manufactured something for him to be mad at and for him to be superior. So this would be a case of the unconscious trying to make the young person more independent, mature. Yes. Because the Jung, I think, uses a certain term where he says that the son is living a provisional life. And this is what we would call Peter Pan syndrome. When you're a man, you're at the age where you're supposed to be a man, but you're not a man yet because you're being kept back. There is something that is holding you back. And in this case, it was the relationship with the father. We must see to it that the conscious personality remains intact, for we can only turn the unconscious compensations to good account when the conscious personality cooperates in the venture. When it comes to the assimilation of a content, it is never a question of this or that, but of this and that. So it's an all-inclusive, all-encompassive practice. The good thing being that if you're going to do dream analysis, to access the unconscious and do shadow work without the help of someone else, this is not going to happen. And this is going to be true for all the things that we are going to discuss later. We're going to talk about a lot of the things, the downfalls of analysis that happen when there is a patient and an analyst that will not necessarily be relevant to you guys. Why is Jung a live stream and not a video? Because I've come to realize that in life, if I wait for the perfect conditions to be met to release a video, I never release a video. So if I allow philosophy to just exist at this perfect iteration, there will never be philosophy on the channel. So instead, we do it as a live stream. Let me get some orange juice. Dean, a video on how to apply dream analysis on own dreams would be very cool. Well, the issue is that this would become a theory of dreams, and as we just saw, it's not possible. Instead, what we'll do is we will do a stream where we will just analyze you guys' dreams. No, this one is cold. Well, I'm glad that you guys are enjoying the stream. I'm enjoying it as well, although my voice is is going. All right, so this is us moving on. We've already tackled a very large portion, and we're going to start to talk about the next part where we are moving forward and we start to discuss the symbolism that surrounds dream analysis. Jung says, just as the interpretation of dreams requires exact knowledge of the conscious status quo, so the treatment of dream symbolism demands that we take into account the dreamer's philosophical, religious, and moral convictions. It's what I discussed previously with the unconscious. If you're going to deal with a patient and that patient grew up in Africa and you are from Germany, you cannot try to analyze their dream through the German collective unconscious. It will simply not work because you are not looking at the extent of philosophy, religion, and moral values that are going to be very relevant to someone who was raised in Africa and that will not make any sense to someone who was raised in Germany and vice versa. We should rather take them as true. So, important. It is far wiser in practice not to regard the dream symbols as signs or symptoms of a fixed character. Please keep that in mind. Just recently, I watched a video of a guy criticizing Jordan Peterson, which is fine. That video had millions of views. The guy attempted to criticize Jordan Peterson through Jungian archetypes, stating that the issue with Jungian archetypes was that they were fixed and they meant one thing and one thing only. Again, I repeat myself, it is far wiser in practice not to regard the dream symbols or archetypes as signs or symptoms of a fixed character. If the guy had done 5 minutes of research, he would have realized that he was actually creating a straw man and that Jung never says that the archetypes or the symbols are fixed. They actually differ and they fluctuate based on the person you're talking to, based on their cultural background, etc., etc. We should rather take them as symbols, that is to say, as expressions of something not yet consciously recognized or conceptually formulated. In addition to this, they must be considered in relation to the dreamer's immediate state of consciousness. If there were no relatively fixed symbols, it would be impossible to determine the structure of the unconscious. So what he's saying here is that while all the symbols and the symptoms are fixed, are up for interpretation, there must be some of them that are fixed, meaning that you can see and that are going to be iterated throughout humans, because without that, there will be no unconscious, what he calls the structure of the unconscious, which you can view as a form of space. Again, we use the metaphor of the dark forest. We don't all have the same dark forest, but we all have a forest. There are trees, there is soil, there is plant, there is animal life, and there is the absence of light. All of that is still something that symbolically is going to be the same for every single human, which is why archetypes exist in the first place. And again, if you struggle with the idea of archetypes as like a psychological concept that has no bearing, think of it as a blood type. What is a blood type? A blood type is an archetype. It's an archetype that was proven by science that shows that some people are A, some people are B, some people are O. That's it. It's fixed, and it has direct consequences on your physiology. It's, of course, much harder to understand which archetype you are psychologically because we don't have solid tests. You know, some people have tried it with the Myers-Briggs test that tells you you're like int G plus blah, blah, blah. That is flimsy. Science at best. It's pseudoscience, but it's an attempt at creating a science of archetype, and we see how difficult that is. And here he discusses the interpretation of symbols and archetypes in different schools of thought. Freudian school operates with hard and fast sexual symbols. Freud's concept of sexuality is thoughtfully elastic and so vague that it can be made to include almost anything. So here he's criticizing the fact that if you allow Freud to interpret a dream, he's going to take something in the dream and say that's a sexual symbol. But he can do that to any symbol because his definition of what is sexual is extremely elastic. We will see that Jung disagreed with a lot of what Freud had to say. Instead of taking a dogmatic stand that rests upon the illusion that we know something because we have a familiar word for it, and this is what I said previously with linguistics, we're getting back into it, I prefer to regard the symbol as the announcement of something unknown. So essentially, when there is a symbol in one of your dreams, it's the unconscious who is not able to communicate something with you because you won't listen, so it presents it in the form of a symbol, because you are much less likely to reject the symbol because you don't understand it. So it's the unconscious that is shooting itself in the foot, in a sense. Take, for instance, the so-called phallic symbols. This is very important. He's going to talk about the cultural relevance of symbols here, which are supposed to stand for the membrum viril, essentially your dick, and nothing more. Psychologically speaking, the membrum, so your dick, is itself a symbolic image whose wider content cannot easily be determined. So the reason why we end up with phallic symbols everywhere is because the phallic entity in itself, the penis in itself is a symbol that represents other things. Primitive people, for example, make a free use of phallic symbols, yet it never occurs to them to confuse the phallus as a ritualistic symbol with the penis. Here is going back into the criticism of the constant sexual interpretations, saying, for example, that there are many cultures throughout the world that use phallic symbols, and that has nothing to do with a dick. Right? They distinguish between the sexual organ of the penis and a phallic symbol. Even though the two are related and correlated in a way, they can also mean entirely different things. And he goes on to explain what the phallic symbol means in some of these cultures. The phallus means the creative mana, the power of healing and fertility. So this is what the symbol is going to mean in some of this culture. Its equivalent in mythology and in dreams are the bull. So, for example, when you look at all of the stories of Zeus turning into a bull, what does he do afterwards? For those you know, the pomegranate, the yoni, the he-goat, the lightning, and the horse's hoof. All of these are offshoots of the exact same symbol. They are all phallic symbols that don't take the form of a phallus. This is all of that, outside of the fact that it's very interesting from a cultural standpoint, is an explanation from Jung to explain that a symbol is not fixed and it can take multiple forms and mean multiple things. Ramash, you go, boy. Thank you for being with us for 2 hours. And I hope you enjoyed the stream. So that was for this symbol. That which underlies all of these images and symbols and sexuality itself is an archetypal content that is hard to grasp and that finds its best psychological expression in the primitive mana symbol. If you play video games, I'm certain that you know what mana is. Usually it's the vitality that you use to send spells. But did you know that for thousands of years, mana was something that was actually believed to exist? And it took symbolical meaning in the creation of these archetypes. In each of these images, so the hoof, the lightning bolt, etc., in each of these images given above, we can see a relatively fixed symbol, the mana symbol, but we cannot, for all that to be certain, when they occur in dreams, that they have no other meaning. So what he's saying is that, yes, the ball technically is related to mana as a phallic symbol of vitality, masculinity, fertility, etc. But if you dream of a ball, it doesn't magically mean that this is what it means in the dream. It can take a different form, it can have a different meaning. If we had to interpret dreams in an exhaustive way according to scientific principles, we should have to refer every such symbol to an archetype. But in practice, this kind of interpretation might be a grave blunder, for the patient's psychological state may require anything rather than the giving of attention to a theory of dreams. This is for the person who asked, who said rather, they don't believe in that because it's not scientifically proven. Jung just explained to you why. It's because if it was scientifically proven, we would need to attribute a meaning to every single symbol, and that would be directly detrimental for the patient psychological state, because it would most likely be pushing meanings onto his dreams that don't actually exist. It's much better to have a fluid theory of dreams. It is therefore advisable for the purposes of therapy, because keep in mind that all of that is to help people feel better, to look for the meaning of symbols as they relate to the conscious situation. In other words, to treat them as if they were not fixed. Once again, for the dummy who thought that Jungian archetypes were fixed. Renounce all preconceived opinions, this is what I say, and try to discover the meaning of things for the patient. If we do this, our interpretation will obviously not go very far towards satisfying a theory of dreams. In fact, they may fall very short in that respect. But if the practitioner operates too much with fixed symbols, there is danger of his falling into mere routine and dogmatism, thus failing to meet the patient's needs. So, Unfortunately, psychology, as understood by Jung, will never be called a science because it cannot function as a science should. It cannot function by creating a theory that states if this happens, then this means this. This is possible, for example, with medical science because it's much more fixed and rigorous, and the symptoms usually mean one thing. Although that's not always true. A symptom can mean many things, but it's even more complex when we deal with the unconscious. So that's a lot to unpack. I'm going to give you a few seconds to breathe, knowing that we only have 30 minutes left. Always, these streams go so fast. Okay, Ben, you're going to have to go to work. I feel for you, and I'm glad that you enjoyed the stream. And there will be, of course, another philosophy stream as soon as possible. Yeah, les satyrs represent promiscuity in Greco-Roman culture, and they have hooves. And not just hooves, they're he-goats. It's a mixture of a man and a goat. Yeah, the stream is done in 30 minutes. It's a 3-hour stream. I'm done at 5 p.m. Sherlock, sorry for repeating, but I believe that death is the first thought to be refouled to the unconscious. I think that's quite the statement to make. I think it's one of them, but I don't know if it's the first. Jung actually argues that death is only pushed back onto the unconscious state when you reach old age. And that actually is what characterizes old age, is the fear of death. When is the next Jung stream? That's a good question. Okay, you know me at this point. I make lots of promises, but unfortunately, life doesn't align with my romantic nature. I would love to be able to make more of these streams because I've come to realize one thing. One, I love streaming. It's super fucking fun. And two, if I only do a stream every Saturday, this is going to lead to only one philosophy stream a month. So I'm trying to come to a solution where maybe I will do my philosophy streams on Sunday and we might have like 2 or 3. But I also have to take into account that I have a family. My wife wants to spend time with me and I want to spend time with her. And that's usually on Sundays. I also work overtime, and that's time that I don't spend working and making money. So it's a bit complex. I'll always let you guys know, but you have the planning for the next month. And if I'm going to do an impromptu philosophy stream, I will always let you know. Have you read the Red Book by Jung? Yes. All right, let's continue. A dream reveals to the doctor, in a wide perspective, the general direction in which the unconscious is moving. It may not be feasible to make clear to the patient at an early stage the deeper meaning of his dream, and that is okay. When the doctor gains such a far-reaching insight, that is thanks to the experience that he has in the matter of relatively fixed symbols. What he's saying here is that while symbols are not fixed, understanding the early symbols in early dreams allows you to direct the patient in the right direction to figure out the dream. And here, I'm going to read the most terrifying dream in the entire book, and then I'm going to go straight to the interpretation because we only have 30 minutes left. But I'll check the chat to see if you guys have ideas. I was called in. The clinical picture made me suspect of an organic disease, but the girl showed traits of hysteria as well. I asked for dreams. The patient answered at once, "Yes, I have terrible dreams. Just recently, I dreamed I was coming home at night. Everything is as quiet as death. The door into the living room is half open, and I see my mother hanging from the chandelier and swinging to and fro in a cold wind that blows in through the open windows. At another time, I dreamed that a terrible noise breaks out in the house at night. I go to see what has happened and find that a frightened horse is staring through the rooms. At last, it finds the door into the hall and jumps through the whole window from the 4th floor down into the street. I was terrified to see it lying below, all mangled." So these are quite the dreams, nightmares. The first one, she goes into her house and all of the doors are wide open and are blown open by the wind, and she sees her mom hanging from the ceiling. And then the next dream, she is at the top of the house and she looks down and there's a horse galloping through the house and destroying everything. And eventually the horse jumps out of a window and kills itself. So this is used as an example of a dream with symbols in it that if you don't understand the meaning of fixed symbols, you will not be able to understand what the dreams mean. But keep in mind that the patient was someone suffering from hysteria and that they were actively dying. So Jung was brought in as a last resort to try and understand what was wrong with her because the doctors could not figure it out. The way in which these dreams allude to death is enough to give one pause. Indeed, they're quite sinister. We must therefore look more closely into the meaning of the outstanding symbols, mother and horse, because these are the key themes of both of these nightmares. These figures must be equivalent one to the other, for they both do the same thing. They commit suicide. The mother symbol is archetypal and refers to a place of origin, to nature that which passively creates, hence to substance and matter. It thus stands for the foundations of consciousness, consciousness being the creation of the living being, the creation that comes from the mother, from the womb. Being within something or contained in something suggests darkness, the nocturnal, a state of anxiety. We saw that previously with the dream of the woman going through the dark forest. Why was she in the dark? Because she was anxious. Going even further, remember the dream about the guy who was climbing a mountain. One part of the dream that was important was the light. There was a lot of light when he was climbing. Why? It was a sign that he was not anxious enough, that he was not paying attention enough. Okay, you see that these symbols are reoccurring in these dreams. All this is dream content, but it is not something which the 17-year-old girl has acquired in her individual existence. Okay, the girl does not understand the symbols because she did not acquire the symbols. The symbols come from a different place. The different place is the collective unconscious. Again, the collective unconscious is not some sort of internet connection that you can tap into and it downloads things into your brain. That is a different discussion that Nietzsche gets into with the spirit of the race. Here, rather, what is discussed and argued is the fact that you exist in a cultural environment that is shaped by the unconscious. And so you start to integrate symbols that you're not even aware of, but that your unconscious is aware of. So when it's trying to communicate with you, it's going to use these symbols. It is rather a bequest from the past. On the one hand, it has been kept alive by the language, so the oral tradition that propagates the symbols and that used to propagate the symbols. Again, because in like Native Americans, for example, these symbols were expressively understood by all as objective. They exist in the Western collective unconscious as subjective because we have stopped discussing them and because we look at them as ridiculous. And on the other hand, it is inherited with the structure of the psyche. And this is the secondary part, the innate part of the collective unconscious, which is quite politically incorrect nowadays, but essentially you are born and you have an essence. And part of that essence is the collective unconscious of your people. And is therefore to be found in all times and among all people. And I love the fact that he included that. Jung is not saying that some humans are superior to others because they have a collective unconscious and others don't. He's saying all people, all humans have a collective unconscious and they're all equal but different. So here we spoke about the mother, and then we have to apply our findings to the dream. So we just discussed what the symbols mean, but what does it mean within the context of the dream? Within the context of the dream, its meaning will be the unconscious life destroys itself. That is the dream's message to the conscious mind of the dreamer and to everyone who has ears to hear. Horse is an archetype that is widely current in mythology and folklore. As an animal, it represents the non-human psyche. It is subject to panics like all instinctive creatures who lack higher consciousness. It is evident then that that horse is the equivalent of mother in the first dream with a slight shift of meaning. The mother stands for life at its origin, and the horse for the merely animal life of the body. If we apply this meaning to the dream, it says the animal life destroys itself. The two dreams make nearly the same assertion, but as is usually the case, the second is more specific, because the more the dreams reoccur, the more specific they become, because the more the unconscious is trying to balance the conscious that is failing to reach homeostasis. The peculiar subtlety of the dream is brought into it both instances. There is no mention of death of the individual. That's also true. In the dreams, the girl is not the one that dies. She witnesses the death of something that stands for her unconscious, but her conscious person as a being is going nowhere. It's untouched. Very important. It is notorious that one often dreams of one's own death, but that is no serious matter. Fascinating. When it is really a question of death, the dream speaks another language. So if you dream of yourself dying, Jung tells you that most likely it's actually not severe at all. But if you dream of someone else dying, you better look at what that person represents, because that could be dire. Both of these dreams, both of the girls' dreams, then point to a serious and even fatal organic disease. And this is the kicker. The prognosis was shortly after burnout, in fact. So this girl who could not be diagnosed comes to Jung with these dreams. He analyzes the dreams and says, this means the animal life destroys itself. Most likely this means that this is correlated to that disease. And the prognosis then goes on to prove that he was correct. Is this anecdotal? Absolutely. Absolutely. There must be hundreds of cases of him saying that and nothing comes to it. But we don't care about these cases. We care about the cases where dream analysis was actually working, what actually served a therapeutic purpose. So this is, to me, the most interesting dream in the entire book. And I think this is actually one of the last that he shares. But I think we discussed like 4 dreams today. And damn, like I've read these dreams dozens of times, and every time like I still get that like feeling of almost foreboding. It's true that it looks like we're tapping into something a little bit taboo, but it's important. Elge Tobiasen, I dreamt that I was shot to death and could feel the sticky blood on my person as I expired. I did not jerk awake, rather had to wait for it all to go black and silent, slowly opening my eyes after. That's crazy. So, Noir Dessin, Jung never goes on to explain, for the simple reason that he's trying to protect the anonymity of the patient, but that the woman had an undiagnosed disease, and the diagnosis fell afterwards. Why did the unconscious mind not give her the more detailed dream at first? So this is, again, purely theory, but from what we understand, the first dream serves as an introduction. There's a chance that if the second dream came first, it would have blurred her ability to understand what it would all mean, because the symbol horse only gains meaning within this entire scenario because it's correlated with the symbol mother. And we are actually at the end of the chapter. So we covered one chapter. Yes, she dreamt of her own death. But interestingly, she did not dream of her own death as in, I am dying in my own dream. She dreamt of seeing something else kill itself. And I think the kill itself part is the important part, because it showed that whatever disease she had was most likely something autoimmune. It was her own body destroying itself. The animal life destroys itself. So at the start of the stream, I said, I don't know how much we're going to cover and how many streams we're going to do. Well, in 3 hours, we covered one chapter. So since there are 10 chapters in the book, there might be 10 streams. Again, it's a might. But if we do 10 streams, it would mean that it would take the entirety of almost 2025 to cover just Jung. So we'll see. Okay, again, no promise, but if we can bounce the frequency up, because in reality, like I've come to realize, and maybe you guys disagree, and it's fine. I'm open to your opinions. I've come to realize that philosophy doesn't really benefit from editing, because you guys are like 250. You've been 250 from the start of the stream. So there's been no back and forth. You've been there for the entire thing, meaning that people who like philosophy. They don't care if it's 3 hours. They don't care if I go into lengthy discussions. They don't have the attention span of a fucking goldfish. They are able to sit through it. So there's a chance that the educated barbarian is going to take place not all on stream, but mostly on stream. I think it makes a lot more sense. Honestly, I don't monetize my video. I don't make money from views. Whether the videos get 10 views or 15 million doesn't matter to me. What matters is that you guys enjoy the content that I make and that I make content for you guys to enjoy. So I really think that the Educated Barbarian is going to be a live stream edition. Yusa says, can we get custom emotes? My wife does something that she thinks is funny and actually is pretty funny. She takes pictures of me where I look goofy and she controls them and she makes emotes from them. Some of them are pretty funny. So we'll see. I don't know if YouTube allows you to have custom emotes like Twitch, but if it does, I'm going to put them because they're like pretty fun. Do niche. Well, we've already done Beyond Good and Evil. So maybe Zarathustra, the spoke Zarathustra on stream. Yeah, and also I think the interaction is great too, because the issue is that, and this is my biggest problem with philosophy, sometimes I make videos and I'm like, maybe they didn't understand that, but I can't like go back and edit post-production. So the fuck do we do then? In stream, if I see something and you don't understand, I read the chat and I can answer. Like, for example, like Noir Dessin, because I didn't understand it properly, didn't understand what disease it was or why the horse meant disease, and now he understands, or she understands. We are very unlikely to do Stoicism on stream because Stoicism is very cut and dry and doesn't have much interpretation value, so I'm not really needed. And Dostoevsky, see, the issue of Dostoevsky is that since these are novels and story, I don't know how interesting it would be on stream because I would just be reading the story to you. So I think that the 2 stories I want to cover by Dostoevsky will most likely be video essays. Have you read works from Naoki Urasawa? No. Besides Monster, no. I know that you would watch it, but I try to make sure that the content actually makes sense. Like it's actually aligned with what would make philosophy more consumable and digestible. But we're actually not done yet, so we're going to finish this. So we just spoke about the story with the horse. It is only through comparative studies in mythology, folklore, religion, and language that we can determine these symbols in a scientific way. The evolutionary stages through which the human psyche has passed are more clearly discernible in the dream than in consciousness. I think that this is a fascinating sentence because the unconscious most likely encompasses all of our previous states of existence, meaning that some parts of your unconscious remember back when we used to be in the caves, remember what it used to be like when we were hunted, and that has not gone away. It's still there. We've been modern humans for give or take 4,000 years. That's nothing. We've been on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years. So this is so important. And this points to the unconscious being absolutely vital, because most likely what made us into humans, what created a distinction between animal into human, is the development of the unconscious. It's the ability to dream and to adapt and to evolve. And I'm going far here, but there is a chance that the very principle of evolution as applied to humans is entirely contingent on the unconscious. This is the reason why we're the dominating species on this planet, because we have something that the other creatures do not have. Although, I think it has been speculated that dogs dream, but do they dream the same way we dream? Questionable. Consciousness all too easily departs from the law of nature, modern man, but it can be brought again into harmony with the latter, the unconscious, that is natural, by the assimilation of unconscious contents. By fostering this process, we lead the patient to the rediscovery of the law of his own being. Hence the title of the book, Modern Man in Search of a Soul. What is your soul? Your soul is what you left in the unconscious. It's always been there. And it's the only way to recover your own being is to be one with that soul. It's to integrate that soul. The way of successive assimilations reaches far beyond the curative results that specifically concern the doctor. So this is for those of you who might say, I don't have neurosis, I don't have mental health issues, why do I care? Because it's not just one application. Dream analysis and the unconscious and assimilation and individuation is one application. It's a therapeutic application, but it's one of many. The most important one for the average modern human is self-improvement. It's self-individuation. It leads in the end to that distant goal, which may perhaps have been the first urge to life, the bringing into reality of the whole human being. That is individuation. We physicians are without doubt the first scientific observers of these obscure processes of nature. As a rule, we see only a pathological phase of the development and lose sight of the patient as soon as he is cured. This is a critique of psychoanalysis, the fact that when they cure the patient, most psychoanalysts are out. They think that's done. My job is done. No, your job has just started. Now, the work of individuation continues because individuation is what is going to prevent neurosis from reoccurring in the future. This is how you get, quote unquote, good mental health. What is good mental health? It's stable mental health. It's homeostasis. So it's a balance of the conscious and the unconscious. You will never be fully neurotic. You'll never not have neurosis, but you can reduce their occurrences with self-improvement, as described by Jung. If we had some knowledge of the ends towards which unconscious psychic growth is trending, towards which psychic growth is tending, and if our psychological insight were not grown exclusively from the pathological phase, we should have a less confused idea of the processes revealed by dreams and a clearer recognition of what it is that the symbols point to. Since every analysis by itself shows only one part or aspect of the deeper course of development, nothing but hopeless confusion can result from casuistic comparisons. It is only in actual contact with the facts as they occur that we can come to anything like a satisfactory agreement. And this is the introduction to the next chapter called Problems of Modern Psychotherapy that we will be reviewing in our next philosophy stream. Ta-da! One chapter in 3 hours. Pretty good. And I know that some people cut the stream at this point and said, oh, is it ending? Yes, it's ending in 9 minutes now. But fear not, it's going to be immediately re-uploaded on the channel and you will get to watch the entire thing. So no problem. And now I'm going to take questions. So any questions you might have, I will gladly answer. Can we watch anime instead of reading books on stream? No. Halloween stream, we want answers. Well, Halloween stream or Halloween video? I know that many people want the video. What's Jung S tier? Yes. What is your opinion on Jordan Peterson? I think that Jordan Peterson was doing a great work and great job when he was what is known as not a psychoanalyst, but an analytical psychologist. I truly do believe that some of his videos and interpretations, which are Jungian interpretations, are genius. Like if you want to watch one, go watch his interpretation of Pinocchio, of the classic Disney movie Pinocchio, and it will open your eyes because it's rife with meaning. That being said, I'm not a big fan of whatever he's been doing in the realm of politics, because I think that politics is the realm of the idiot and the mediocre, and so he has soiled his talent and his ability to tap into symbols by just wrestling in the mud with the pigs. About the child aeterna, which is the man child that Jung calls the puer aeternum because he's trying to show off and speak Latin. What do you think the young man relationship is with his mother? It's impossible to know. I'm glad you're covering Jung. I've been wanting you to discuss him for some time. Yes, some of you guys have been waiting 2 years for this. What does it take to tap into another culture's collective unconscious, if it's even possible? That's a very good question. It takes openness, ability to renounce your preconceived notions. It takes living in that culture for a long time, speaking to the people. But I also think that it's impossible to fully integrate the collective unconscious, which I guess is deeply controversial, but humans have an essence. We're not interchangeable creatures. You carry with you the thousands of years that your ancestors spent on this earth. To me, it's logical. What do you think about people who don't agree with Jung, like me, who think that it's not scientific? Well, if you watch the stream, you understand why it's not scientific. This will be available later. Yes, my friend. You will get to watch the full 3 hours with great sound quality thanks to this mic. Should I do ASMR? Do you think the collective conscious in America is different than France? Yes. Yes. Are you familiar with Jung's theory on Uncle H and Odin Wontan? No. I'll read up on it. Bathtub stream when implying I can take baths, implying that I even fit in a bathtub. What about people who are mixed race? What sort of cultural collective unconscious would they have? Oftentimes, the collective unconscious of the people they lived with, because they're severed from the collective unconscious of their other ancestors. Like I make no mystery of the fact that I have African ancestors, but I don't think that I'm connected to the African unconscious. I'm tired of bodybuilding and calorie counting. I've had an eating disorder and I'm obsessed about perfect split and I need a split that fits my busy schedule. I just wish lifting was fun again. Well, congratulations. You are going to make the best gains of your life, because if you are doing things in the gym you don't enjoy and eating things you don't enjoy, you are actively hurting your gains. Do lifts that you enjoy, the splits that you like. That is bodybuilding. This idea that bodybuilding has to suck and be painful is wrong. And it's pushed by PD users. So you know it's wrong. Lucas, how do I maintain consistency in my workouts? I am a Jungian student, nice, and I've read a lot of philosophy, but consistency is physically matters eludes me. Well, you're going to have to do what I did when I was younger, which is apply the discipline that you use in your studies to physical fitness. And in that regard, I highly recommend you read the book Sun and Still by Yukio Mishima, because he speaks about that for the entire book. What's planned for next week? Next stream is going to be next Saturday, and it's going to be a hypertrophy stream where I review programs, and I don't know if I'm going to review programs. I have like a very fun idea for our next stream where I will have like a specific theme. We'll see. Have you heard about split brain surgery? So it's the idea that the consciousness is like in certain compartments of the brain. I'm not surprised by this, but don't let that like reduce your understanding of the conscious just because it so happens to be the consequence of something physiological. If anything, it should like make it grander. Can you make a Sun Can Rock video? I absolutely can. I hope I will eventually. Coffee only programs, Dan? Oh, you mean like the reviews on coffee? Yes. Do not send your programs before I open the stream. Okay, I keep repeating that. I won't be able to review it. I sometimes dream about horrific stick figures in the dark, creepily staring at me. The dream usually ends when I fearfully try to get closer to choke them. What could that mean, NH? I think it means that you are being challenged by your unconscious to be brave, because the dream ends when you're brave. So next time, just like rush these motherfuckers and like fuck them up and see if the dream reoccurs. Is Ken Kitano's physique achievable? I think that the leanness is the one aspect that's not achievable. Oh, you wrote a university essay on Mishima. That's so great. What dream do you have recently? Any recurring themes? I think I had a dream recently. See, it's so hard to remember dreams. That's why you have to write them down. What did I dream about? I think I dreamt something like someone very close to me disappointed me. Does dreaming in color versus black and white mean something? That's a good question. I don't even know what colors my dreams take. Do you guys remember if they're in color or black and white? Why are you putting Synthor on your biceps? Because it's the only way to be a freak, baby. Freaky peak. Oof. My biceps are still sore. Are you part of any religion? Nope. Do you even see your dreams? What a good question. Do you even see your dreams? Or is it just your brain reconstructing everything once you wake up, which is now the leading theory on the matter? Have you noticed people never dream about phones? Very true. That is very true. People rarely dream about technology, which might just be the sign that there's a mismatch, that our collective unconscious that we tap into is not yet adapted to our new gadgets, and so it's not able to have us use them in the dreams. Like, people rarely dream, for example, of taking the plane, but they dream about riding a car. Why? Because one was invented and available to the large public before the other. So we see that the unconscious is adapting, but not fast. So maybe in 20 years, people will dream about smartphones. And that is that. That is the end of the stream. Thank you very much for watching the stream. I am hard at work to make videos. I want to make videos. But at this point, I don't know when they're going to come out. So keep an eye out. Click the bell notification, blah, blah, blah. Click like. Subscribe to the channel, blah, blah, blah. To not miss any videos when they come out. And yeah, I'm going to wish you a very good rest of your day. Relax, train if you train. I'm taking a day off today. It's my day off. I'm going to spend time with my family, and I hope you do the same. Thank you for your presence. I greatly enjoyed this philosophy stream, and I can guarantee you that it won't be the last. Keep an eye out on the community page, and you will be aware of when the streams are going to occur. Merci beaucoup, les amis. Je vous fais un gros bisou. Mouah.